Welcome to the October 22nd meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. Councilmember Rick LaLance has our prayer and our pledge.
All right, if you guys bow with me. Lord, we thank you so much for all the blessings in our lives. God, we come to you every day, and we pray that you will be with us tonight and lead us in our decisions. We pray that we'll make good decisions, and God, we just pray that you will be with all those that are sick and need you, and that have had things happen in their lives where they need your comfort and your healing. Lord, just be with us again, and we pray this in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have two presentations tonight. First, we're going to start out with our STARS Award. And Ms. Russell, if you want to come start with that presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Anthony Wolf with the Fleet Department and Jeremy Vassar with the Street Department are the City STARS winners for the month of September 2020. While working in the Barfield Park area, Anthony was operating a boom mower and Jeremy was following behind in his truck when an elderly gentleman flagged them down. The man said there was a woman in the park with a flat tire needing assistance. Anthony and Jeremy found the woman in the parking lot with two small children sitting in a running car due to the extreme heat. The lady was worried about her children and how long she would be able to keep them in the running car. Anthony and Jeremy were able to find the spare tire under the car and change it out. The woman was extremely grateful for their assistance and later called the street department to let their supervisor know how much she appreciated their help, in addition to noting how kind and polite they were. On this day, Anthony and Jeremy went above and beyond the call of duty, making sure this family received the assistance they needed. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Let me. I'm going to put my mask on to make sure that I'm complying with it. So, Anthony, if you'll, congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you, sir. Jeremy. Thanks, buddy. All right. It's also my pleasure to start out with a proclamation. You know, we have a lot of people who obviously, especially going through this past year with COVID-19, that have to rely on social media, streaming, and City TV3 to find out what's going on inside their city. And we are blessed that we have got a production team in City TV3 that is second to none. We have known that for many years. They've been nationally recognized. This year, they won over 19 awards at the National Awards Ceremony. So I want to read this proclamation. And our City TV3 team, are y'all? And I see John back there, Steve back there. I know we have Michael Lynn, who's here, Alan Bozeman, who's the director, and then Michael Nevels is back. Michael, if you'll shake the camera up and down. I don't know if you can do that to show that you're back there. There you go. All right. Whereas Murfreesboro City TV3 has been recognized nationally for quality government television programming from the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. And whereas Murfreesboro Government-Oriented Television Station received 19 national awards during the 35th Annual Governmental Program Awards, and whereas the entire Murfreesboro City TV team is an amazing and award-winning group of professionals who daily strives to communicate and promote the many positive aspects of the city. Now, therefore, I, Shane McFarland, Mayor of the City of Murfreesboro, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim October 22nd, 2020 is a day to recognize Murfreesboro City TV for their many accomplishments and urge all the citizens to join them in recognition.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Definitely. And I will say this, with our team that's here, Marcus, I don't think is here tonight. Want to make sure and recognize Marcus Delaney. While most of us are at home, they're still working. They televise most every single city meeting, and so that means school board. Michael Lynn just got finished televising the elections, so they have really upped their game to make sure that they do everything to keep our residents informed. And so we are grateful for everything that y'all do. Thank you again. All right. Now, I want to ask Miss Victoria Butler if she'll come up. And if you'll stay 6 feet away, if you don't mind. I'll put my mask on. I want everybody to hear. You know, I've been over the last, Councilman Kurt Wade is one who made recognize this to make sure that we know as a Murfreesboro resident. But over the last many months, I've been driving back and forth from Murfreesboro to Shelbyville and seeing this construction that's going on sort of right outside of Deason. And I noticed nearest green on the sign. And so I want to read this and then give you a little explanation on why we're doing this. Victoria Edie Butler grew up in Lynchburg, Tennessee, and whereas she's the master blender at Uncle Nearest Distillery, Victoria is the great-granddaughter of Nathan Nearest Green, the slave who taught a young Jack Daniels the craft of distilling and using the Lincoln County process. And whereas this process became so renowned around the world, the state of Tennessee made it law in 2013 that any product labeled as Tennessee whiskey had to be made with the process. And whereas Victoria always knew of her ancestors' role in the making of Jack Daniels, now the rest of the world has begun to hear of the Nearest Green's role. Fawn Wiver, co-founder of the Nearest Green Foundation, started Uncle Nearest 1856 Premium Whiskey and released the first batch in July of 2017. And whereas Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, named after a former slave and the nation's first acknowledged master distiller of Jack Daniels whiskey, opened the first phase of its Nearest Green distillery in Shelbyville, Tennessee on September 14, 2020. And you'll wonder why that we do this, because Victoria is a Murfreesboro resident and has done all this while she lives in Murfreesboro. So now, therefore, I, Shane McFarland, Mayor of the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim October 22nd, 2020 as a day to honor Victoria Edie Butler for her accomplishments and urge all citizens to join in the recognition. Kurt, thank you for letting us know about this. All right. Also want to make sure and announce that in conjunction with Executive Order 54 from the Governor of the State of Tennessee, I think Ms. Scales-Harris is online participating in the meeting electronically. Ms. Scales-Harris, can you hear us?
I can.
All right. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right. We have the consent agenda. You have 3 items in front of you. Is there anything that needs to be taken off of the consent agenda?
If there aren't any, I'll move for approval.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales-Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklett.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right. We'll move into old business. We have ordinance 2028, amending the sign ordinance. This is second and final reading.
coming back to us on this.
Is there anything, Mr. Holtz, we had a couple of emails from different people about the fines, and is that coming back to us? Did y'all have any other correspondence on that?
It's the increase in the fees for buying back signs that we confiscate in the right-of-way is a part of this ordinance, and we're increasing them. Any sign over 2.5 square feet, we're going from 25 to 75. Any sign under 2.5 square feet, we're going from $5 to $15 per sign. But again, that's signs we confiscate in the right-of-way.
Okay.
Did we make any changes from first reading till now?
No, there's been no changes from first reading to second reading.
Yeah. All right. I thought there were going to be some changes made, but it's all right. Whatever.
I want to make an motion to amend that any sign 6 square foot or larger, that the owner of the sign is notified within 24 hours to give them the choice to come pick it up or not. That way they actually know that the sign was picked up.
Could we say instead of 24 hours, within a reasonable amount of
Yeah,
time, something like that? That would be a little maybe easier.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, you have an amendment? We have a motion, do we have a second?
Mayor, did we not change that last week?
I can't hear, Ms. Scales Harris, if you will repeat that, I can't hear you.
I said, did we not change that? What last week on that?
Nothing.
Yeah, I don't think we had any changes.
I think we just tabled it until the mayor came back.
No, I was here for that one.
It passed, but there were some no votes on it, I think, or,
Yeah.
because it's second reading, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of thought that the vibe of the last time we had this in front of us was that we were going to wait. I think you weren't here maybe the second reading.
Yeah.
And so we had sort of said, it was a 4-3 vote and
Okay.
on the first reading and didn't want to, but I kind of got the vibe. I thought there were some other people who wanted to see some changes made.
Yeah.
And so I thought we were going to go through a little bit of a process on what those changes might be, but I'm
So why don't we do this? John, if you'll remove your amendment.
I remove my amendment.
Okay, why don't we, Robert, if you don't care, if we can get a motion to defer this, and then if there's anything that we need to send back to staff over the next week, you've got a week to send that to staff for any things that want to be changed?
well, and I don't want to delay it just on my.
I agree with you. I mean,
Okay.
I thought we were going to revisit some stuff, and I thought it was more than just that. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's a
there were
reasonable
several
thing,
items.
but there were a few
Yeah,
items.
there were
that-
several.
Okay, so, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll make, you withdraw yours?
I withdraw mine.
All right, I'll make a motion, we defer it.
Second.
All right, motion is second.
And sorry. I'll let you.
Can you send me the information?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Send
and I
directly.
apologize. I thought we were going through a different process. I would have done that.
I thought so too.
Yep,
Sorry.
all right, so we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now move into ordinance 20031. This is fiscal year 21 budget amendment, the second and final reading and administration. We had our first reading at our workshop this past Wednesday. Any questions based on what we discussed?
No.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to new business. We have land use matters ordinance 20OZ32 rezoning approximately .66 acres along Dill Lane, south of East Main Street. Mr. Blomley, floor is yours.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor McFarland and members of council. Our first public hearing tonight comes to us courtesy of the Journey Home, who owns property located on the west side of Dill Lane, located at 206 Dill Lane. It's in the block of Dill that is in between East Main Street and Mercury Boulevard. Property is currently zoned RS15. As you can see by the map in front of you, there's kind of a smorgasbord of different zoning classifications along this block of Dill Lane. There's RM16 and a little apartment complex to the north. There's a PCD to the south where a gentleman has a car restoration business. There's a RM12 zoned townhome development further to the south of that. Some single family parcels along the east side of Dill Lane, and then at the corner of Main and Dill is the Ascend Federal Credit Union property that stretches over to Rutherford Boulevard. The Journey Home approached us about this property earlier this year. They have 2 single-family homes on the property. And their goal for this property is to provide affordable rental housing for the community. Mr. Foster, the director of the Journey Home, indicated to staff that the existing single-family home at the rear of the property was in poor condition and in need of being raised. And so he wanted to be able to keep at least the same number of units on the property as was there right now, 2 single-family homes. The fact that there are 2 single-family homes on the property is a non-conforming use, as the property is only zoned single-family, and having 2 single-family residences on one lot that's zoned single-family is not permissible. So it's a lawfully established non-conforming use. And so in working with Mr. Foster to try to find solutions in order to be able to rebuild the house in the back, because they would not be able to rebuild that house if it was torn completely down, we suggested that they rezone the property to RS8, which would allow lot sizes small enough to where he could divide the property into 2 lots of record, enable them to do a flag lot at the rear in order to rebuild a single-family home at the rear of the property. Mr. Foster and his representative, Mr. Matt Taylor of SEC, moved forward with that idea. So there's no increase in density proposed. What they propose to do is to divide this property into 2 lots of record, rebuild the house at the rear on a flag lot that would stretch out to Dill Lane, and possibly rebuild the house at the front. Not sure if they're looking to rehabilitate that or to rebuild it as well. I think Mr. Foster is here. He says it's currently in good condition. So they would rebuild the house at the rear of the property only. And the result would be 2 single-family homes where there are 2 single-family homes today. Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter on September the 2nd and voted to recommend its approval. We need to conduct a public hearing on this matter tonight and be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Scott Foster, the director of the Journey Home, is present if you have any questions for him. And looking for Mr. Matt Taylor. I see him in the back hiding. They'll be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Plumley. All right, we'll have a public hearing on this rezoning request. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, if you'll come to the podium, if you'll have all of your comments directed to the City Council, you'll have 3 minutes. If you're an individual, 5 minutes speaking on behalf of a group. We'll get all the questions answered at the end of the public hearing. So anyone wishing to speak for this rezoning request, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. We'll consider rezoning approximately 0.66 acres. Ordinance 20-OZ32 on first reading.
If there aren't any questions, I'll go ahead and move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to Ordinance 20-OZ33 to rezone approximately 78 acres located along Medical Center Parkway, Robert Rose Drive, Wilkinson Pike, and Willow Woke Trail. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland.
Mr. Foster.
Just a note, Mr. McKnight just advised me that there are some folks here presumably to speak at the public hearing.
Okay.
And due to our capacity, we'll need to invite them in one at a time.
Sure.
But we do have some folks out there that are waiting, so
Okay.
I'll go ahead and move forward with my presentation. Subject property is located along the north side of Medical Center Parkway and the south side of Wilkinson Pike Drive. Totals about 78 acres. It's currently zoned MU. Portion of it is also located in the GDO1, but the majority of it is located in the Gateway Design Overlay District number 1. It also has frontage along Robert Rose Drive across from the Henley Station apartment development and along Willow Oak Drive as well. There's been quite a number of Planning Commission meetings. and it's kind of been an evolution to get to the point where we're at right now. Initially, this was, the entire request was as a plan development. However, in consulting with our legal department and having some discussion with the Planning Commission, it was determined that the commercial component, there was not enough specificity in their request for it to be included as a part of the plan development. So the applicants, after consultation with staff, revised their request so that the area that's colored in red on the map before you has been requested to be rezoned from MU to commercial highway, CH. So a portion of this request is for a bulk zone, the CH request, and a portion of it is for a planned development. So the area colored in blue is what they're proposing to zone to PUD for the Clary Park PUD, and the area colored in red is what the applicants are proposing to zone CH. The CH would be governed by our zoning ordinance, as we would regulate any other bulk zone, the standards of the Gateway Design Overlay District, and of course our design guidelines would apply to any development that were to develop in the CH area if this request is to be approved. As I mentioned, the total acreage is 78, and so the breakdown of the acreages are about 30.4 acres are proposed to be zoned commercial highway, and the balance of the request is to either be zoned as a part of the PUD or will be public or private streets. 19.4 acres of the Clary Park PUD will be devoted to multifamily residential dwelling units, or apartments, more commonly known. The total number of dwelling units in the areas for multifamily will be 600. 19.4 acres, that's about 30.9 dwelling units per acre for the areas that are proposed to be multifamily. 24 acres of the planned development is proposed to be for single-family attached uses or townhomes or stacked flats, as they're called in the pattern book. Total of 290 single-family attached dwelling units. 24 acres, that's 12.1 dwelling units per acre. The residential component of the planned development is approximately 43.4 acres for a total of 890 units. That the density shakes out to be about 20 and a half dwelling units per acre over the whole span of the residential component of their development. I will mention that in the multifamily portion of their PUD, they are committing to at least 4,000 square feet of commercial space in the multifamily areas. The request is broken down into areas, area 1 through 6 or 7, and so there will be at least 8,000 square feet total of commercial space in the areas that are denoted for multifamily residential. The surrounding areas and land uses and zoning, of course, the avenue is directly across Medical Center Parkway. To the north of the subject property is some of it is zoned RS-15. That's the area where the tornado of 2009 took out several houses along the north side of Wilkinson Pike. And then there's also an existing county single-family residential subdivision to the north, stretching beyond those homes that are in the city limits. To the east of the subject property is the Henley Station planned development. As I mentioned before, it's an apartment complex with a very small commercial component to it where the Goat restaurant is. And of course, there are some commercial lots fronting on Medical Center Parkway with some commercial centers on them as well, near the intersection of Robert Road and Medical Center Parkway. During the Planning Commission meeting, there were several concerns. Somehow I have hopped way far in my presentation, and my apologies. During the Planning Commission meeting, there were a number of concerns that were brought before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission approve the plan generally as it was presented to them. So I did want to mention that at the September 2nd Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing and voted to defer action at that meeting. And at the September 16th meeting, the Planning Commission took the item back up under old business and then voted to recommend approval. So, of course, I'm here to forward the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval to you with the pattern book as it's been submitted in your agenda packet. Staff did want to point out that there, in our opinion, there still are some opportunities that we wanted to bring to your attention, some concerns that we had primarily with the architecture in Area 2. And so I'll briefly go over these three items. Area 2, and Mr. O'Shea will give you a presentation with more detail on the proposed development. But Area 2 is in the area where I've circled on the map. If we could pull the map up, it's the area just to the south of Wilkinson Pike and just to the east of Gresham Park Drive. So staff's remaining concerns are the interior units of these townhomes. There are not porches proposed for the interior units. Instead of doing porches, they're proposing at-grade patios in front of the units. And so staff still sees this as an item that as an opportunity for potential improvement. The porches are at 14 inches above grade. We've compared this to the urban townhouse, the RSA Type 3 zone. I think what they're trying to go for with this development is a more urban feel, a more walkable, pedestrian-oriented feel like we would see in a more urban setting. And the RSA Type 3 zone requires minimum elevated porches of 18 inches. So staff had recommended to the applicant for 18-inch, that the porches be elevated 18 inches above grade, and that would provide for a little bit of privacy for the first floor and for the porches as it relates to the public areas of the townhome development. The applicants came back with 14 inches, and the Planning Commission is recommending approval with the 14-inch elevation off of grade for those townhome units. Also, since this is in our Gateway Design Overlay District, we feel that the baseline should be what we would consider enhanced elevations. In the applicant's pattern book, they have indicated areas that they are earmarking in the Area 2 townhomes for their enhanced elevations with shutters. But it's staff's opinion that in the Gateway Design Overlay District, which is a very special place in our community, the baseline should be the enhanced elevations on all side and rear elevations. With that being said, I will defer to Mr. Randy Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell and Mr. Walter O'Shea have a presentation that they would like to give to you. And then what I'll add is that council has forwarded several questions to staff over the last several weeks. And so after Mr. Caldwell and Mr. O'Shea present to the City Council this evening, Ms. Margaret Ann Green of the planning staff and Mr. Sam Huddleston, Executive Director of Development Services, will be coming back to kind of answer some of those questions in this more public setting, kind of giving all of the council members an opportunity to hear the answers to those questions and providing you with some additional information. So if you'll give me just a moment, I will get Mr. O'Shea's presentation up. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council. Randy Caldwell. I guess I can't say I'm with Reagan Smith because I've been officially retired for a week now, so I'm not quite sure how to introduce myself other than they pulled me out of retirement back into it because Kevin happened to be sick, so he wasn't able to attend. But appreciate the opportunity to be here. I know I've been before you for many, many years, and I think a lot of you know my past history. As you know, Reagan Smith, myself, led the efforts in the master plan for the Gateway, which included creating the design guidelines that were established for that. We followed that up with the design guidelines that we wrote for the city. And then on top of that, I've been serving for many years as the chairman of the Gateway Design Review Committee. So I can tell you, I take it very seriously, whatever I bring up before this body, because I feel a lot of responsibility for the Gateway to make sure that vision is carried through. When the opportunity came up to work with Tommy on this and bring a developer to the table, the first developer that came to my mind was Hines Development, and that comes from a history that goes back to the 90s that I have had with Hines, going back to when they developed Cold Springs and my involvement and Reagan Smith's involvement with them during that time. Why did I bring them to the table? Because I knew the quality of development that they would bring to the table, but not just the quality that they brought to the table at the time, but also their follow through, even if they weren't developing a piece of property, the criteria that they established with the design guidelines within their own development, the expectations that they had with people developing in there, and how they followed through on making sure that their vision was adhered to is something that they've done wherever they have gone. And so I made the introduction to Tommy to bring them to the table, as I thought that they were a good fit for this development, and I thought that they would create a vision that was deserving for the Gateway. And I do think they've done that. I wouldn't be up here tonight if I didn't think they did. I have seen the architectural expectations that come through with the Gateway, the open space expectations that come with that, the land use expectations, and what the vision has been for that area. And I do believe we meet that with the proposal that we have before you today, and I think that's evidenced by the Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve it as well. But I just wanted to make the introduction, give you a little bit of past history that I've had personally with Hines and the quality they bring to the table. Walt is going to go through the presentation to walk you through. We have been through a process, and it's been beneficial. The project has improved every step of the way, and I think it has arrived at a point where I feel very good about it, where, how it meets what the vision was and the expectations that are out there. But with that said, I'll let Walt take the stand now and go through the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you, Randy, for the introduction. Thank you, Matthew, as well, for the introduction. I have to say I'm thrilled to be here. It's been a long road coming to this path. We've worked very hard over the last really 18 months to develop what we believe to be is an outstanding project that we are so pleased to present to the city. I'm here on behalf of Hines. We're one of the largest and oldest and hopefully what most people would say is most prestigious real estate development and management and investment firms in the world. We're founded back in the late 1950s by Gerald Hines with the vision of providing superior quality, whether that's in the development of our projects, in the management, and in the operations. And that simple ethos is what has carried us forward over the last 60 years and allowed the firm to grow and succeed. I have been with Hines for 24 years, obviously the majority of my career, and very pleased and honored to be able to present this project to you on behalf of the firm today. Before I kind of get into the details, as Randy mentioned, would like to highlight the process that we've been through and thank the staff for all of their patience in working with us. We've been through, I think 12 different iterations of our zoning book, making changes and modifications and improvements and concessions along the way. We've made many concessions, giving concerns to staff to enhance the project and to provide additional public infrastructure. And with that, we've worked with Mr. Smith, we've worked with our builders to all make adjustments to our financial expectations in order to provide that quality and those commitments to the city. As Randy mentioned, we went to the Planning Commission, and I think we went through 4 or 5 different meetings in front of that board. Went through a lot of discussion on the quality of the architecture, on the design, on the rationale behind it, and ultimately that led to their full support of the plan we have proposed today. Let's see. I'm not sure. Do you know how do I advance, Matthew? Just hit the down arrow. Oh, there we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I wasn't pressing hard enough. So won't really spend time on on Hines, other than what I've kind of explained to you before, and I know we've had opportunity, some of us, to meet and give you a little more background on the firm. I would like to hit a little bit on kind of our regional structure, because I think this is important for a couple reasons. One of the things that we have done here in the Southeast and focused our expertise on is land development. An example, as Randy mentioned, is Cool Springs, a 1,000-acre project that we developed in Franklin back in the 1990s. And through that process, we've developed an expertise in how to plan, manage, and execute projects. We don't build all the buildings inside of these projects, but we demand superior execution from all of our builder partners, whether that's commercial or residential. And that's a particular expertise that we've developed through 6,000 acres of land development here in the Southeast over the last 30 years. Would like to highlight the tenure of our officer group that you can see. As an employee of 23, 24 years with the firm, I'm still in the middle of the pack. And what that means to you is you have continuity. You have an assurance that the team that is here in front of you today, and I wish more of my team could be here, but we can't travel because of COVID, will be here the first year of the project, the 5th year of the project, the 10th year of the project. And I'll give you an example. Developed a 2,500-acre master plan community in St. Augustine called Palencia. Set a new standard for excellence in that part of Northeast Florida. We began that project in 2001. We finished selling the last 2 lots a few months ago. Myself and my partner, Michael Harrison, were the 2 people that initiated that project, and we're still involved today. Even this week, I was still reviewing architectural plans for homes and commercial buildings that were being developed in the project, even though we don't own any more land there. That's the kind of commitment that we bring to the table. And part of the reason that we do that is the structure that we have within the firm. The partners that bring forth a project not only have the obligation or the opportunity, but the personal obligation to co-invest. 50% of the capital that goes into a project from Hines comes from the employee partners. So you have our commitment to this project, and this project will have our attention going forward. Touched on a little bit of our experience in Nashville, but wanted to highlight a little bit more. As I mentioned, Cool Springs was the first project we did, which we believe set the standard for suburban mixed-use development within Nashville. And we're looking to build upon that experience here with Clary Park. We've led the investment of over $400 million into the Nashville economy over the last 30 years, and have 3 active projects, Clary Park included, that will represent an additional $750 million to $1 billion of investment here in the local economy. And when I talk about the quality of Hines and what that means, I think there's a great example of what that translates to in terms of asset value here in Nashville. We recently sold 222 2nd Avenue, which was a 400,000 square foot office building we developed in Sobro. And the price that the institutional investor market gave to that asset was over 240% higher than the highest price a building had ever been sold in Nashville before, at $730 a square foot. And so, institutional capital, large investors, they follow Hines, they know where we're going, and the fact that we're here in Murfreesboro does mean something to them. Moving on to our request. Why are we here, in front of you for a rezoning? The property as it stands today has substantial existing zoning rights. It's zoned mixed use, and a large-scale development could be executed on the project without a rezoning. The core reason why we've ended up going through this rezoning process is the vision that we developed for Clary Park, and that is for a walkable, livable, pedestrian-oriented community that not only provides housing for renters, but also provides for-sale housing, which is an element, a use that's currently not allowable under the zoning. So as we talked through with staff, we came to the conclusion that we needed to actually rezone the property in order to provide for that for-sale housing. So that is the prime reason. As Matthew mentioned, we're also asking for an exception on the density in multifamily, which is capped within the mixed use at 25 units an acre, to go a little bit above that to an average of about 31 units per acre. And he highlighted the overall program of 600 multifamily units, 290 for-sale townhome units, and 30 acres of commercial. Wanted to, also just hit up front some of the impacts that the project will have, and we'll talk about the mitigation for those. One is the sewer. We know the city just passed an ordinance earlier this year that limited capacity or limited density to 9 units an acre everywhere in the city, with the exception of the gateway, with the recognition of the high-density development that was expected within the gateway. With the program that we've proposed, our overall sewer usage will be 12.8 single-family equivalents, which is a little bit higher than the 9 that's prescribed per the ordinance. And I see Darren sitting next to me. Per the information we've got from Darren, there's obviously capacity fees that will be paid, and I'll highlight those in a moment. And then obviously one of the other impacts of a project of this scale is traffic. We'll be generating, or projected to generate, about 820 peak hour trips in the morning and about 1,370 peak hour trips in the afternoon, based on the traffic models that were done by Reagan Smith. And so we'll talk a little bit about the mitigation for that in a moment as well. So, I guess, why should you as the City Council support this project? That's what I'm here today with the team to ask of you. And so we'd like to kind of walk through the rationale on why we would hope this project and our proposal merits your support. One is a substantial investment. We haven't wavered in our commitment to this project, which we began pre-COVID, have not wavered one bit as we've ridden through the coronavirus. We're looking at over a $200 million capital investment into the city of Murfreesboro, and that will ultimately translate to an asset value of over $300 million. That will generate property taxes after build-out of over $1.4 million annually for the city. Clary Park would be, in its combination, probably the largest taxpayer in the city of Murfreesboro upon completion of the development. And our global brand. We know that means something. As I represented in the Sobro asset sale, institutional investors take note of where Hines goes and develops. We have state-of-the-art research department that guides us on trends and points us in the direction of where we should be looking, and therefore institutional capital knows that if we're targeting a market, that's a place that they should be looking as well. Second point is a quality of execution that raises the bar. Our mantra internally when we go in to develop a project is we want to look at what's there in the marketplace, and we want to do market plus one. We've developed Clary Park to be a mixed-use, pedestrian-centric village that's organized around park spaces that link all of the uses together and provide easy access to I-24. And really, that's a lifestyle for young professionals that's not currently offered in the city. The only pedestrian-oriented area that's really walkable with shops and restaurants is in downtown, but that doesn't provide close proximity to I-24. We know that to attract young, educated professionals, they need easy access to the commuting corridors. By placing Clary Park in proximity to the amenity base of the avenue and to I-24, we strongly believe that we're going to attract a very affluent, young, educated professional group to come and live in Clary Park. And our rents and home prices represent that. Our rents are at the top of the market for Class A plus product. ranging from $1,350 on the low end to over $2,000, and our townhome pricing represents that. We're looking at pricing that's probably going to be 10 to 20% above the top of market, but we believe that the quality of the plan and the execution can merit that. One of the reasons that the Gateway popped up on our radar as a place to look and to invest is because of the imbalance that currently exists right now between employment and housing. There's about almost 9,000, over 8,000 jobs currently east of I-24 within the Gateway District. Yet there's only 1,900 currently housing units either completed or under development. So you have a massive imbalance of people looking to live close to where they work with not enough housing to support that. So with adding Clary Park, we'll obviously bring that number closer to 2,900 units, but still well under the 5,000 units that those jobs demand for housing. Talked a little bit about sewer in my intro as to what the ask is. So I wanted to hit the sewer usage and the fees that will be paid. We got an analysis from Mr. Gore that noted that we will pay $4.3 million in capacity fees to develop the program that you see in front of you today. And that includes about $940,000 in excess fees because of that overage over the 9 units an acre. That 12.8 versus the 9, that equates to that $936,000 in excess capacity use. I understand from the letter we got from Mr. Gore that the total plant capacity is about 20 million gallons a day. We're projected to generate about 260 gallons per day. Thus, we'll be utilizing about 1.3% of the plant's capacity, and that's at build-out 7 years from now. And for that use, we'll be paying those $4.3 million in fees. In terms of the road network, and we'll talk a little bit about Wilkinson Pike. We've had several meetings with the residents, including one last night, and we know the concerns regarding the current traffic on Wilkinson Pike. So what we're doing to mitigate that as quickly as possible is we agreed to advance the timing of the completion of Willow Oak Trail in order to be able to relieve that, and I've got another exhibit to show on that in a little bit in a second. And then expanding a half a mile of Medical Center Parkway to 3 lanes in 2021. So this is something that we will do up front, not as individual parcels are developed along. If we never develop any commercial property along Medical Center Parkway, you will have a completed 3-lane road across the entire frontage of the property. Those two investments or those two commitments represent almost $3 million of capital investments into public improvements. And then finally, we obviously went through the city-mandated process on traffic, and we've committed to do all of the improvements that were the result of the traffic impact study, in addition to some requested improvements that the city traffic engineer asked of us above and beyond what the traffic study recommended. And then finally, as I mentioned, the project has MU zoning, and that MU zoning provides significant development rights as is. And what we're asking for is actually less than that. The MU zoning does provide that you can develop 50% of a parcel for multifamily if it's less than 10 acres. In theory, this property could be chopped up into 6 or 7 smaller parcels. You've got road access that accesses the property from multiple locations, and it could be developed in multiple smaller mixed-use projects where you get no commitment on transportation, more apartment units, up to 925 apartment units, and you don't get the integration of a master plan, nor do you get the commitment of a master developer that's managing all of the different uses as they're brought to the community. The current MU zoning provides for 96 different use types. With staff, we've gone through and cut that list down to 66. So it's a much more restrictive list of uses that can be developed than MU zoning would provide. And finally, there is a current master plan that's been approved for the property. The program that we've asking you to approve actually has less transportation impact. There's 9% less traffic that's going to be generated from the project based on the current program compared to the program that's already in place and approved for the site. So I wanted to hit on, we met in a town hall meeting a few weeks back and actually had another meeting last night with some of the residents who live north of the project on Wilkinson Pike. And we heard, two primary concerns from them, and obviously they're here tonight, so I'm sure they'll speak on their own behalf, so I don't want to speak for them. Obviously, the largest one was the traffic on Wilkinson Pike. So I wanted to kind of look at that and walk you through why we feel the approval of Clary Park actually will benefit the current situation. Looking at this graphic, the current trips, these trips were measured in February 2020, so pre-COVID, we did a traffic count, and it gives you the existing trip counts in the morning, 472, and in the evening, 523. Based on guidance from the city traffic engineer, we then grew that traffic out to 2026, which is the kind of expected build-out period of the project. So that results in a 23% increase in traffic on Wilkinson Pike from background traffic, nothing to do with Clary Park. So if Clary Park is never developed, this is the background traffic that will increase. And then we looked at, once we developed the property, today, well, let me kind of go back to the condition today. Over on the left side of the page, you see the condition today, where all of the traffic going on Wilkinson Pike comes onto Gresham Park and goes down Wilkinson Pike to Thompson Lane. That's their only route, and so that's the route that they take. So all of that traffic goes in front of the residents that live on the north side of Wilkinson and at West Park. With the completion of Willow Oak, which again, we've accelerated the timing of that, what that will do is provide a diversion for a good portion of that traffic, so that post Clary Park, so adding our traffic from the development to the model and adding in Willow Oak, traffic counts on Wilkinson Pike will actually drop. They'll be 25% below current conditions today in the AM and 16% below current conditions today in the PM. So again, we think that this, the completion of Willow Oak, is really the best thing that we can do to help provide alleviation to a situation that's already a rough one. I'll skip kind of a discussion of drainage because staff has asked that we defer this because the city engineer has not had a good chance to kind of review. We did take a look at some of the ponding and where water's flowing over and had some ideas on how we might improve the situation, but we'll defer that discussion until staff can look at it a little bit further. We've talked briefly about the vision for this project. I just wanted to highlight some of those elements for you, because I think taking everything, when we look at a project, architecture is one part of it. Landscape architecture and land planning are equally important. You want to make sure that you understand how all those elements interact with one another. First and foremost, this mixed-use vision, it's a mixed-use village with an emphasis on the pedestrian experience. So when you first come into the project, the entry off of Medical Center Parkway, that processional to us is extremely important. We'll obviously mirror the landscaping on the other side of the intersection, and you'll come right into what will be the heart of the community, which is this grand lawn space. This is obviously a beautiful park space that we're going to develop that will have activated areas in it. So you'll have places with fire pit, you'll have a small stage and amphitheater, outdoor games. The whole idea is to create social interaction amongst the neighbors and use this space to really, this space and the park network to have those interactions occur. And you can see, this is an image of what, when you drive into the project, past that landscape processional, this is the vision that you will come upon. And, we think this will become a very special place in the city. We have noted that, in addition, we will include office space on the ground floor, and that office space will allow for people to interact and provide services to the residents and interact with the linear park system we'll be developing. All of the uses, including the grand lawn, multifamily projects, and commercial, will all be linked by a linear park system. That linear park system will run along Clary Lane. It will extend up to Robert Rose so that the folks that live in Henley Station can also use that pedestrian network to come into Clary Park and across over to the avenue. We really want to promote pedestrian and bicycle activity within the community. Moving into the single-family attached area, Area 2, which is the area where we've had some discussion, more discussion, and continued discussion with staff regarding the architecture. A couple things I wanted to point out in terms of the overall planning for this. First of all, the reason we decided to do the townhomes in this area really had to do with, looking at the existing conditions and what it gives us. You've got beautiful tree-lined borders on either side of this area too. And so we're going to preserve those tree lines and then develop a park network that runs along the tree line and brings all of the pocket parks to tie into that and create a very, a pedestrian-friendly and pedestrian-oriented environment. Where the project, it's a little hard to, I wanted to make sure that in terms of the layout of this, it's understood that all of these units, the fronts of the units are not facing the driveways, that all of the units are alleys, are feeding where the garages are, and the front of the units all face on park space. So where we address Willow Oak Trail, which is really the only place that the project will be visible from a public roadway, those are the front of the units. Same thing on Wilkinson Pike. The front of the units face Wilkinson Pike. Now, Wilkinson Pike will have the berm. It's a 5-foot-high berm and landscaping on top, so you probably won't see much of the units from Wilkinson Pike. And then, as you come into the project, we always make sure that we look at the processional and have units, the fronts of units facing the roadway as much as possible. And then where we have units that we have the side of the unit facing the roadway, what we do is we do an enhanced architectural treatment for the side of the units. And so that's what this exhibit shows, where when you come in the project, the units in green will have the most enhanced side. So those units that are on Wilkinson Pike, Willow Oak Trail, that are on the exterior on Wilkinson Pike, and in prominent locations within the community. And what that will include will actually be a wrap porch, and I'll show you in a second. And then in areas where it isn't as prominent, we have another enhanced side elevation that just does not include the wrap porch. And then in the interior of the project, where you have units that are buildings that are side by side, we don't include the full enhanced side elevation. And what we did to kind of develop these elevations and this product was very unique. We've worked with a builder, David Weekley Homes, in many projects. I know Councilman Wade was familiar with one in Jacksonville that we worked with Weekley on. When we talked to them about Clary Park, we explained to them the importance of the architecture and that we needed to come up with a product here that was outstanding. And so what we did is we actually engaged an architect directly that we've worked with many times to design the elevations on behalf of Weekley. And so that's the product that you see today in front of you. And what we looked at, and we always, again, kind of back to this market plus one and saying, let's look at the best quality product, the best quality community in Murfreesboro, and let's look for, how can we improve upon that? And what we looked at to really as a comp was Shelton Square. I know it's predominantly single-family homes, but we feel like they're very well executed. It has kind of has some alley load homes that is located in it. So what I've prepared for you here is a little comparison to show you the architecture that we're proposing relative to Shelton Square and how we looked at that and said, okay, let's do market plus one. So first are the front elevations, where you can see Shelton Square on the top and our proposed townhomes on the bottom, and they're very similar. You've got porches on the front. We obviously have some brick treatment, have a little more roof treatment, and have a similar kind of grade change. This is about a 12 to 14-inch grade change, which is one of the kind of issues that we're talking about with staff. So you can get a feel for this is what they're developing in Shelton Square on the front elevation and the front of what we're proposing for Clary Park. On the side elevations, I think this is one area where we really saw some opportunity for improvement. So the top two homes are two of the two homes at the end of the alley-loaded section within Shelton Square. So these are the most visible homes from anyone driving into the community from either side. So what we've done is develop side elevations that include water table, a brick and stone water table up to the bottom of windows, shutters on the sides, horizontal trim that breaks up the large expanse of siding material, additional treatment on the gable areas where you'll have louvers, changes in material, and corbels. And then In certain areas that I mentioned, the most enhanced will have a wrap porch that actually comes around the side. And again, I think that's a feature that I don't know of another community where that's being developed currently in Murfreesboro, that level of detail. So this elevation is the wrap porch elevation that we highlighted in green. The next elevation is where we would do where we highlighted in yellow. And then the only change in the other locations where we're not doing the extra enhancement is to reduce the shutters. And again, we feel like even without the shutters, we're well above market in terms of the quality of what we're delivering. And kind of a similar analysis on the rear. This is what we're proposing. The only difference for the areas that aren't visible is that in the interior units, we won't have shutters. The exterior units will have shutters. We'll have the water table. We'll have a shed roof over the garage. We'll have dormers on the roof. In many ways, this is a very attractive, part of the building that's going to be facing the alley. And again, here's kind of the alley treatment for some of the alley-loaded homes in Shelton Square. So I just want to kind of summarize and hit on a couple key points. First and foremost, we feel like our reputation is the gold standard for depth of experience, integrity, and the creation of communities of exceptional design. And we feel like we've proven that over and over and over again in the communities we've developed. And that is what we plan to do here in Murfreesboro. We're proposing substantial capital investment on behalf of Hines and bringing institutional capital to this marketplace during very uncertain economic times. We think the model of a pedestrian-oriented master plan that integrates uses creates really a new model for the city in terms of how you can develop these high-density nodes and complete the vision of the gateway. We've committed to substantial and pre-impact mitigation. So both in terms of the sewer fees as well as to the timing of the roadway network, those improvements will be done before the impacts of the project are realized on the network. And obviously, if the project never develops out, those improvements will be in place. And finally, our overriding goal here is based on the demographic research that we've done, which is to attract and retain educated and affluent millennial buyers and renters that we think are ideal residents for the city's future. We know that millennials are getting a little bit older. They're not ready to move into the single-family home and take care of the lawn. They still want walkability. They want the social connection. And we think Clary Park can be a place for them here in Murfreesboro. I appreciate your consideration. We'll obviously be here to answer any questions and look forward to discussing your concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Any questions for the applicant? All right, seeing none, staff? Do we have any questions for staff? Ms. Green.
Thank you. It's good to be here again. You, Mayor and Council. Mr. Blomley had mentioned that he invited myself and Mr. Huddleston to come to the meeting tonight because we've gotten some questions in the past, and we wanted to make sure that those questions that have been posed to us by various council members was available to you tonight to consider. And so I just wanted to go through those. Specifically, let's see, I'm probably not supposed to close these all. Some of the questions that deal with what's different in this development as opposed to what would ordinarily be allowed in the Gateway, and that's why I'm here, because of course the Gateway Design Overlay District is, I think, one of the things that I've done very well in the city. I've reviewed those developments, and I think become very familiar with the ordinance, so I just want to talk to you about those differences, and I'll be short because I was instructed to be in short, but but of course I can elaborate if you wish. I did want to point out that this development, of course, is a larger development, and you do see the two different zoning districts on this property because part of the property is proposed to be zoned PUD to allow a use that's not allowed at all in the mixed-use district. So there's, in the Gateway, I think there's two sides on the interstate, one across the interstate and on this side of the interstate. On this side of the interstate, it's zoned mixed use. There are no zoning districts that allow townhomes by right. We allow the development of a vertical mixed use, so commercial first floor, residential above, and of course you could own your condo in that scenario. So the zoning does not prohibit ownership, and just to clarify, it does not allow townhomes. And so this plan proposes 290 townhomes, which would not be allowed at all in the mixed-use zoning. And so that's one of the most significant differences, and I think probably the driving factor in the plan development. Mr. O'Shea mentioned that there have been months and months and several backs and forth with the plan, and there certainly have been. Some of that has to do with the fact that the commercial portion is quite unknown to them. They were unable to develop a plan enough that it qualified to meet the minimum standards of a plan development or zoning ordinance. So that's why today you see those two zoning categories, one for commercial highway and the other for plan unit district. Staff suggested commercial highway because the commercial highway zone has no entitlement to any type of residential use. So they could have chose just to leave some of the property zoned mixed use, but we wanted to make sure that there was no perception of them trying to get around those standards, and they were completely on board with that. We didn't make the decision for them, but because they couldn't clarify their plans, we made that as an option. And so you see this larger master plan development with two different zoning districts. What that did was present an opportunity because the commercial highway zone allows some uses that are not compatible with residents, where people live. You don't want a tire change store next to homes. And so their offer, and I don't think anybody's mentioned it tonight, was to record some restrictive covenants that deal with use. I of course, typically caution City Council because it's difficult for the city to enforce, or the City Planning Department to enforce those restrictive covenants. But Mr. Ives has worked with them and their attorney on a copy of those restrictive covenants, and that may be something that you want to discuss tonight. So the biggest difference, of course, is that there are 290 townhomes, and also the mixed-use district allows a maximum density of 25 dwelling units per acre. So this plan would allow 485 apartments. They're proposing 600. So another difference is they're proposing 115 additional apartment units. And then, of course, the townhomes. So I wanted to point that out to you. I know that Mr. O'Shea gave you some numbers about how much could be apartments here. I think they're a bit misleading. He doesn't have the benefit of my or the planning department's familiarity with our zoning ordinance. It is not allowable to chop this up into a bunch of little lots, develop it with 25% apartments. There's no scenario where that's allowable. It's a bit of a misrepresentation of the truth. The gateway requires master planning. It's not an option. It's not something that we just got as a benefit of this development. Whoever comes has to do a master plan. Now, they may not have that strong ownership regime that Hines maybe can offer. I'm not very familiar with that, but that is something that he spoke to. I just wanted it to be clear that the numbers he gave you are very misleading, and you should probably just take them with a grain of salt. And I suspect it's because he doesn't have the years of experience with the zoning ordinance that we do. And so 890 total units. The zoning would not allow 290 townhomes and the additional 115 apartments. Some of the other changes that they've asked for some parking exemptions for the area where they have the apartments and commercial. And so I just want to point out there's an exception to that. That's not totally out of the ordinary for a development where you would see commercial and residential on the same property, because there is a complement of times and uses, and sometimes people may or may not be on that property. So one of the exceptions they asked for is for that. They've also asked for a reduced rear setback for some of the apartment or the townhomes, and that's something that we have in the past seen, and so it's not completely unusual either. The gateway requires the primary facade of all residential buildings, including single-family and multifamily buildings, to front on a public street. And so some of these buildings do not front on public streets, and that could be private or a public road. And so 9 of the units in Area 2 have some of those side porches that were mentioned, but it was only 9 units in Area 2. None of the units in the other townhomes in Area 7 have those treatments, and so I think they don't comply with the gateway standards in that aspect. I also, those units which are required to front, the Area 6 townhomes are required to front on Robert Rose Drive and Willow Oak Trail. And I didn't see any enhanced elevations, which basically is the shutters on the windows. When the program book talks about enhanced elevations, it's talking about shutters specifically. None of those are on the units in Area 6. The gateway also requires that all dwelling units with attached garages shall have access from either the side or rear. Front-loaded garages are prohibited. And I think that they've been able to do that with the Area 2 townhomes, but the Area 6 townhomes, it's not clear that they are actually meeting that standard. I do know that the program book labels the road in there an alley, but it looks more to me like maybe a private drive, and that may be something that we can work through with more information. We just don't have at this point. The gateway also requires usable porches, which are porches deep and wide enough to reasonably accommodate outdoor seating. And the vast majority of the townhomes in this area don't have usable porches. What they have are covered stoops. And the proposal has a at-grade patio next to the covered stoop, which in my mind is indicative that the porch isn't actually doing what it needs to do. And so there are very few units that actually do have a usable porch. They're proposing the covered stoop. The Planning Commission did question that because at the presentation there were some images shared, and the revised book that you have before you does have images of those at-grade patios next to the stoops that you can see. And the Planning Commission did ask for some minimum dimensions, which have been added. But that's another difference from the Gateway standards to this program. Another standard is that a building's exterior architectural expression and design compatibility with neighboring projects are the primary concern. And these buildings, or particularly the townhomes, do not fit in with the character of the Gateway. We would ordinarily expect to see much, much more brick. There's a lot of hardy, and I think there's some elements that are similar to Shelton Square, and those are the single-family homes that they've shown. But they're not the typical brownstones that we would have expected in this area. We've also asked, the Gateway standards ask for variation in building elevations, and that repetition of similar designs should be avoided. And staff, of course, is concerned that there are only 3 variations of the buildings for 290 townhomes, and there are 4 color palettes. And then the last is that large uninterrupted expanses of a single material are discouraged. And there seems to be a lot of hardy, and I think there's plenty of opportunity to change the material and change the color, change the texture. I did take some photos after work today and before the meeting, so they're really quick, of some townhomes in Murfreesboro that I think are compatible. I think the first one here is Stratford Hall. I actually, when taking the photo, had somebody come out and want to know why I was taking a photo in Stratford Hall.
That happened to my wife last week looking at a paint color. The lady came in and was like, what, you got a problem?
Yes, so the Stratford Hall police came for me. Rightly so, they're proud of their community. And I told them what I was doing, and I actually had my 3-year-old with me carrying around a yardstick because I was measuring the foundations of the building. And I told them what I was doing, introduced myself and what I was interested in, and said that I think that one of the best things in Stratford Hall, these images I have are just examples of things that are done well, is I think their porches are so effective because I saw people sitting on the porches. I saw people talking to others, walking down the street on the porches, and I really thought that that was a great example of design done well. Something else I think they've done well is breaking up the units, breaking up the facades. I know that I've read in the paper, I've been criticized for how much emphasis I've placed on the architecture, but in my experience, the details make the difference. And this is the Gateway. There's no other place in Murfreesboro like this. It is different. It is special. It means a lot to our community. We have invested lots of money, lots of time, regulations. I feel like the Alexander Hamilton play says we've come of age with our young nation. I feel like I came of age with Murfreesboro and the Gateway. I came here fresh out of grad school. I've been here 16 years, learned what I should do and what I shouldn't do. Somebody told me some of the past decisions that maybe I've made are good examples of bad examples. But so I think our community, I didn't have to leave Murfreesboro. I think our community has some good examples of what we were asking for, and these details and the architectural detailing are important. Stratford Hall, these porches, he said it was his favorite thing in the whole development. The neighbors really get to know each other, and he said he was from Pennsylvania, and that was something that was more common where he isn't, I suppose because it's an older place. I have some student housing on the screen on Middle Tennessee Boulevard. It is the Boulevard townhomes. They're 3 stories, so they're a little odd, but you can see how you can use brick, and sometimes people say if you have brick, it's just too much brick. But there are changes in the buildings, changes in the colors of the brick. There's treatments on the color that really break it up. It speaks to the street, and of course has the raised foundation. This is another picture I took, which isn't great, but I just wanted to show you. I've heard from our citizens that they really like the townhomes in Rockbridge Cove. So what I have on the screen is an image of Rockbridge Cove. None of these are the same, but I think that I'm just trying to communicate to you how important materials, texture, details are, and that's what we've been asking. And a lot of the reason that we've been focusing on it with Clary Park is because the CH zone I feel that the Planning Commission is very comfortable reviewing CH developments in the Gateway. They remain in the Gateway Design Overlay District. Nothing's changing. I think that there's a comfort there with reviewing any of those out parcels that are proposed. So I haven't spent a lot of time critiquing those, and also because it's a bulk zone and not a planned development zone. But the residential portions are where we can really, I think, have the most impact. And I'm excited about an opportunity to have a development style that would produce ownership. Of course, it doesn't mandate it. They certainly could rent it out. But I'm excited about that. I just wanted to point out that we were really wanting to express how important the area is to City Council and to us. And I think the last image is one that I pass every day, Gold Valley Drive. What I was showing here is how you could do changes in the plane and the material and colors, and I think that they've done it pretty well. And so these are, you can see all mostly in one area of town because I only had an hour and a half between work and tonight to show it to you. But I just wanted you to have some examples of what I think has been done well, what we've been encouraging. It's not out of character for Murfreesboro. I think that it's, I hope it helped clarify what we're talking, and Mr. Huddleston has some comments for you. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I have a quick question, Margaret Ann. Thank you for your presentation, but
Thank you.
I know, and this is all due respect to the applicant, but Shelton Square is not in the Gateway, right?
Not at all. It's not. And it's all single family detached. And to take it a little further, the planning department has even less say over the architecture of single family detached homes than we do with townhomes and commercial. So it's really not apples to apples.
Okay. And the last question I have, and this may be from Mr. Huddleston, we've over the last many years, there's been a couple of reiterations on what we've done on Wilkinson Pike. So I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we lessened the protection that we had on Wilkinson Pike, but I think we also, okay, so you're going to, all right. Yeah, so we also said, but there's no, I think what we said, there's only parking can back up to Wilkinson, no buildings, but we had talked about a berm at some point being on Wilkinson.
Yes, sure. The Gateway Design Overlay District has several types of buffer, one along I-24 and then one along Wilkinson Pike. It runs along Wilkinson Pike on the south side and is about 100 feet deep. The Wilkinson Pike buffer prohibits the use of the land in that 100 feet. No parking, no structures. Really, it can be landscaping or some sort of drainage facility. And some of the property owned by Mr. Gatton several years ago, his representative Tommy Smith came before you and asked for you to consider reducing that 100 feet to 40 feet. And in exchange for that reduction in the Wilkinson Pike buffer only on this Gatton property, they offered to construct a berm, a significant berm, within the next growing season and recorded restrictive covenants on the property and made the city party to those restrictive covenants. And so that is the property that we're talking about tonight. It's been several years ago. It's well past, of course, the next growing season. The Planning Commission did review and approve plans for that buffer. It was just never installed according to that agreement.
By the same owner has this in front of us, right? I mean,
the same entity owns the property that made that promise and owns it now. They're, of course, looking to sell it to Hines. Hines doesn't own the property today. We made Hines aware of that commitment that hasn't been followed through on. And their proposal was, okay, we hear you with our first phase of development, we're proposing to put it in. So whenever they're starting development, that's when they're proposing to put it in. I think previous renditions had it phased, but I pushed back pretty hard saying that there were promises made at City Council, and it would be hard for me to stand in front of you expecting somebody would remember that commitment and not be able to speak to it. So they offered to put it in their first phase of development, which is along Wilkinson Pike.
Okay, Mr. Huddleston.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. First of all, I want to answer a question that Randy Caldwell asked. Citizen, Randy, is a correct term that you need to use now. Randy's and his firm have been involved in a lot of developments in Murfreesboro, and from a personal standpoint, congratulations on your retirement. Your presence here in the city of Murfreesboro and your work here in our community has been very beneficial, and so appreciate working with Randy and his team. Walt and the Hines Development, they've assembled a good team, and so we've had many long meetings and discussions. They presented a project to us tonight in the Gateway. You know, the Gateway concept really came around in the late 90s, kind of grew out of the Commerce Center project, and that might be a term that's familiar to some and maybe not, and a new interchange plan for I-24 as part of our transportation plans with TDOT. The master plan on that, and I brought a copy tonight, it was before our new city logo. We still have the old gold seal in there, and this was approved in 2003, and so we're 17 years into execution of this master plan. I think we've followed that master plan pretty well. It's served as the vision document. It's served as kind of the guiding documents, and then that was backed up, of course, with the gateway design regulations and supplements to the zoning regulations. But I think we've done a pretty good job as a community in following that vision that was created and then maintained by this and other councils and planning commissions. As you see tonight, there is and there will continue to be a tug on the plans and the developer and the real estate, and that's okay, because I think out of that, we get better projects and we get better plans. And tonight we'll have another opportunity to complete another piece of the Gateway puzzle. So what was the result of all that we've done out there? Well, there's $1 billion of private and public investment out there. Walt rehearsed with you tonight the very significant investment that Hines will make to add to that. But $1 billion, and Margaret Ann said it, and Walt said it, and he said it attracted them here, that the Gateway is a special place. It is the citywide example, I think, of high-quality developments. Not the only place with high-quality developments, but it is the citywide development, citywide standard of high-quality developments. We often hear from developers when they come to see us, we'll meet the Gateway standard. And so you can see how influential that's been on our community. So by creating that special place, we've created a lot of interest there. We've created a lot of opportunity there. And so what's our challenge as a community? Well, one of our challenges, I think, is to protect that investment. And we can talk about that in different terms, but we need and we want to protect that investment. I think we need to maintain the specialness of it and increase it where possible. I also think that we need to maintain the standards, and so you've heard a lot of talk tonight by our team and Walt's team about standards and about the architecture, and I think we need to target that. We were interested and excited to meet with Hines and to see their development ideas and development plans. Many of our staff were familiar with some of their projects, and so we wanted to see. In fact, their reputation was here before Walt showed up, and so I think our staff and I think our administration, we were excited to see what they could bring to the table to help supplement and add to the specialness of the Gateway. They had a reputation for high-quality projects. I think some examples were shared with you tonight. And some of those examples were shared with staff early on, and so we really were interested in the quality and the types of development they had, especially, if I could say it this way, probably the mixed-use variety. We find it to be rare to find a company that can cover the spectrum of residential and commercial and office and retail, from one thing, and so that often leads to disjointed projects sometimes when you're looking for mixed use. But Hines seemed to bring that to the table. I'll tell you though, every time we met with them, and from very early on when we met with them, we talked about two concerns for the residential. One of them was the density of the residential, and one of them was the quality of the residential. And there's probably not a meeting we had or an interaction we had with their team. We had individual interactions perhaps on elements, but in general interactions where we didn't go back and bring up density and quality. And I just think that maybe the quality that they presented just falls short of maybe of some of the examples that they've shared with us. And I also think that the quality doesn't get us to the specialness of this place. They're a good product, but not the special product that makes the Gateway click. And so, this property has a very significant entitlement. And Mayor, you ask us, this body challenges us. I think you will ask yourselves tonight, with this significant zoning entitlement that this property already has, what benefit what thing will the city get out of it in exchange for the density request that they've got and for the quality of the product that they've got. And I think that'll be a good question for this group to work on while we hear from the public and you guys consider this in your deliberations tonight. So the staff and the development team we're available for questions now and after the public hearing.
Can I, for clarity's sake, make sure I'm understanding what you're saying? So you're saying over the last 10 months, you've brought up these things, density and quality, and just for clarification, I want to make sure I'm hearing that right.
Day one.
You're
yes.
saying it's too dense and not good enough quality?
I think,
This whole
I say
time.
we raised those as issues.
Yeah, okay. All
Right, and we kept working toward those issues. And it is a back and forth, a tug between their development plan and staff's response, and Walt and his design team will attest to that, that it has been a very significant tug of war. But yes, from the very first meetings when we started talking about a specific development plan, density and quality of the residential became.
And one of the things, since then, has the density come down any, or I understand we got rid of single-family residential at some point or another. Is that, so since we started that, density actually has gone up? Is that correct?
I would say that there were several iterations where density went up, and there were a couple of iterations where density came down,
Okay.
and we arrived, well, the design team and the developer arrived at where they're at today with that proposal.
All right, I'm trying to get it square in my head,
Yes,
the
sir.
timeline, okay? Thanks.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's open the public hearing, and anyone wishing to speak for or against this proposal, please come to the podium.
I get 2 minutes or?
Get 3 minutes.
3 minutes, all right.
Yes,
Jim
sir.
Transport. I live on Highland Park, and we're here tonight. I believe the crux of this whole matter.
Can you tell me your name one more time?
I'm sorry?
Tell me your name one more
Jim
time.
Transport.
Okay.
And I'm going to cut to the quick. I mean, we've had to endure the traffic issue, and that's been brought up. There's no doubt about it. I mean, when Trust Point went in, we endured that. We endured the EMTs, the fire department, the police department. In fact, even when there's not heavy traffic, you can look down the road and it looks like Jimmy Johnson going around the first turn over there on Gresham. Or if you look at the other side coming over the hill, it looks like Bubba Wallace coming out of the fourth turn. But the crux of the matter is this. If you rubber stamp multi-use tonight, we don't have a problem with more homes, residents. We would just would like to protect that part of that area. But if you take that area and you rubber stamp it with Gresham Park and Wilkinson Pike, that 8 acres there, Mr. O'Leary was very transparent. He said, yes, you can put a 75-foot building there. Now, I've been in Kelly Beam's office on the 3rd floor, and I understand that there was a change there. I've looked out that window and I've been able to see the top of my house. If you go to a higher grade and you go to 75 feet in a hotel and you look out, you're going to see us barbecuing and sitting on our deck. Now listen, I don't mind smelling French fries from McDonald's 12 o'clock midnight. That's temporal. I don't mind the sirens, and the residents in our neighborhood don't have that problem. We know we're going to have to endure whatever development goes in there in the traffic on Wilkinson Pike. But I submit to you, gentlemen, tonight, if you were in our position, would you want a 75-foot building looking down on your property? Why don't we just keep it on Medical Center, or we can put it in their development, in the development themselves, the hotel. Or keep it on Medical Center. I mean, we've already got one 3-story building over there at the Chamber, and that's beautiful. But please reconsider that one piece of property before you make a rubber stamp on multi-use. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Transport. Like your visor there. All right.
Good evening. My name's Gary Keckley. I'm the CEO of Good Works Unlimited, parent company and owner of the Villages of Murfreesboro. at Willow Oak Drive, a senior community. And before I take just a second, for 8 months, we've had almost 300 tests, and the Villages of Murfreesboro has 0 positive infections.
Great job.
Nada, none, 0. So we're glad to be here.
Congratulations.
We are. This is a great opportunity. I think Mr. Huddleston put it right. This is a special area. We're here because we believed in that too. And I think we've got a great opportunity to work with the Heinz Company to get to that special solution. We also have an incredible opportunity to do something that's not here today, and that's diversity. Diversity. The whole park is well laid out, but it's been laid out before new urbanism really took hold. And the newest versions of new urbanism, as you see them around the country, don't exist in Murfreesboro. Here's an opportunity to do that. And finally, great ideas are great, but if they don't get executed well, they're worthless. We've got an opportunity to work with a world-class developer. I've seen their work since the late 70s. At every project, they get in there, they do what they said they'd do, and they stay with it. The Heinz Company is the perfect partner to get this done. So I would encourage you to support this project, as we will be good neighbors with them.
Thank you, Mr. Tepley. Thank you for your hard work.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. My name's Adam Seaborn. I live at 2726 Crosswoods Drive. I'm one of the neighbors that are north of the property. Just wanted to bring up a few things. I'd like to commend Ms. Green. I feel like she has a obviously a passionate interest in the Gateway area. I would encourage you guys to listen to her concerns. Also, I forgot the gentleman's name who spoke after hers, but yeah, they both had, thank you. They both had very good concerns that I would encourage you guys to listen to. I've spoken with all of you, or some of you, through email and different dialogue. I'm not advocating for infrastructure in advance of development here, and I don't think that's necessarily what other people are advocating for. We all realize that Wilkinson Medical Center has traffic issues. I don't know if I necessarily agree with Mr. O'Shea's analysis of the traffic impact study. I'm not sure exactly if that's public domain, if that would be reviewable for us. That's a question I would put to you guys, if you could answer that. That being said, there's still traffic that's going to go towards Thompson Lane, towards Broad Street. It's not going to spill out just in Medical Center. I know they're trying to sell the idea of all the traffic is going to come towards Medical Center, but we all know that's not realistic. Traffic is going to flow to the path of least resistance here. Also, I know a few people have brought up the idea of property rights, and I definitely want to make sure we respect people's property rights. I think that if you are allowed to do something by law, and you should do that. However, I think we can all agree a common sense approach is one's property rights can end where they infringe upon another's. A common example of this may be noise. For example, there's a city noise ordinance that we can enforce, city permitting, grading changes, those type of stuff. So I would encourage you to think about, not necessarily property rights as a absolute here. I'm an engineer by profession. I like data. Data is what drives a lot of my decisions. I know you guys are hearing a lot of opinions, so I'd like to just, I did a little research. According to what I was reading today, and this is on a site called bestplaces.net, which seemed to be pretty accurate. 85% of the Murfreesboro community commutes by car today. 8.2% commute by automobile. So that's a total of 93% plus that are going to use cars. Now, with all due respect to the walkability feature, and I think we're all for more walkability in this area, the primary mode of transportation is going to remain automobiles. So that's going to dump potentially 1,300, 1,500, 1,700 cars plus onto Wilkinson and Medical Center. Again, I think we need to catch up a little bit to our infrastructure, if possible, prior to these type of developments. I went, one last thing, and then I'll step aside. I went and I looked at, try to find some studies over the areas that look at some subjective and objective numbers here to what these type of developments can do to a community, particularly single-family homes adjacent to them or around them. I found an area which I emailed all you guys. It's for reference. I know some of you already said you've seen it. It basically, the highlights, it's Little Rock, Arkansas, which the demographics actually line up much better than I thought they would. Population slightly larger in Little Rock, but it kind of gives us a snapshot of the past. The median income delta is pretty close, the age difference and so on. Education levels are almost identical, household size. So what it had is it had 16 years of data that included 78 projects, 15 of which were large market rate apartment / condo townhouse type developments. They conducted a study using census records, real estate data, crime reports, et cetera. What they found, and here's the crux of the matter, property values around large apartments, defined as over 5 buildings, actually went down 2 years once it was announced by 17%. Within 2 years after the development, they dropped by 25%. This is market rate apartments or above market rate.
Mr. Seaborn, thank you so much. I hate to cut you off.
Okay, I understand. So just be realized that violent crime also went up by 0.28 and 0.74% near these buildings, and serious crime went up by 1.1, 2.14% per the study. So I would encourage you to think about that.
Yeah. Thank you for your
guys.
email too.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Take this off. Am I allowed to take this off when I speak? Okay. My name's Madeline Zotti. I live at 2721 Highland Park Drive. So my yard backs up to Wilkinson. There's one row of homes over there. I appreciate so much. I spoke to everybody but Mayor McFarland, who I emailed. And I want you to know that we greatly appreciate you hearing us out time and time again when we come in front of you about the same Wilkinson Pike issue. And I did want to get across that we do not oppose this master plan as a whole. We oppose parts of it. We greatly appreciate the zoning to PDU, which allows for the townhomes. That looks like a really great transition to our neighborhood. And we also wanted to communicate that the reason that we didn't show up at the planning and zoning meeting was because when we left the neighborhood meeting, there was not a clear understanding of the overall density. And those of you at the Planning Commission have met with us before over this issue over the years and years, and we would have been there if we fully understood the overall numbers that they were talking about. So our biggest issue with density, and you're going to hear it from everybody, there's 2 issues, traffic and drainage of the water. I'm going to defer to the neighbors whose yards fill up with water and let them talk about that. But the traffic is already an issue. So the reason you're going to hear it over and over and over is because we live it right now. It is hard to get into our neighborhoods, hard to get out of the neighborhood, and the ambulances use it as a thoroughfare. Their exit to the hospital through the emergency room is off Gateway. So they come down Wilkinson, they never go Medical Center Parkway. And so that's not going to change, except even with his traffic study of 800 more cars in the morning and 1,300 more cars in the afternoon, that just means more accidents and more ambulances. So that's a super big concern. And on top of it, I don't know if you saw in his area 2, which is the townhomes, they've proposed gated entrances. So a gated entrance at West Park Drive, I don't know if you can look where that is, but where they're going to extend West Park onto the south side, they have a gated entrance, which is going to back the traffic up in a crazy kind of way. So so my last point would be the transition, which has changed, and Margaret Ann spoke about that, and we spoke about that at length. But the berm never got built. I don't know how you guys can enforce anything in a master plan. I don't know that part. But I would say, please refer to what happened in 2017. We were promised this. If it had been planted and those trees were 3 years tall, maybe I wouldn't be so afraid of this situation. Maybe our kids would be protected in their yards, but that didn't happen. So what security do we have that is going to happen once the property sells? So that would be a big one. And then what is going to happen with this master plan? The way we see it today, how can it be enforced? And have you guys thought about that? Because if you're already making exceptions for greater density and all these things at this planning stage, how do we know it's not going to get worse?
Thank you so much.
My points. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Richard Lyles. I live at 2667 Cross Park Drive. I realize this property is going to get developed regardless of what any of us have to say. However, I would really appreciate it if you would consider the density of the homes that you're being asked to put in this place, because that's going to do nothing more than add additional traffic. Some mornings I have to wait at least 15 minutes to get out of West Park Drive onto Wilkinson Pike because there's so much traffic coming off of Medical Center and off of Thompson Lane. I have literally waited from Thompson Lane all the way to West Park Drive in a traffic jam many nights trying to get home. One night I tried to started to go down Wilkinson Pike, turning off of Thompson Lane. Traffic was already backed up all the way to Thompson Lane. So I go up to Medical Center. Medical Center is not any better. It's just 4 lanes of traffic trying to get to the interstate. Now, I understood that this company is planning on putting a 3-lane highway in. Is that going to go all the way to the interstate? Because if it doesn't go all the way to the interstate, you haven't done anything. You just complicated your traffic. Someone mentioned about the flooding. There's at least 3 areas on Wilkinson Pike that floods when we have heavy rains. And the city has closed the road in the last year at least twice because of water across that road. 2 of the areas, one is on either side of Mr. Ketron's house. The other one is up where when the hospital trust point added on, all you did was move the water down the road. And now it's in the 2 houses that are right there next to Van Cleve. And it backs up in their yard and comes across Wilkinson Pike. So you've got to do something with Wilkinson Pike before you do anything, as well as Medical Center. This Medical Center is a nightmare. I sit in my house in the evening and I hear the ambulances, I hear the fire trucks, I hear the police officers heading all up to the interstate because of all the wrecks that are up there because there's no traffic lights on, was it Grissom Park or Asbury Lane that comes out up there. So please, consider the density, consider the traffic, and do something about the flooding that occurs over there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shacklet, you thought I forgot about this.
All right.
I've got it right here.
Glad to know you're using it.
Good evening.
Figured out how to work.
Do I just start talking?
Yeah, just tell us your name and address, please.
My name is Regina Heasley, and I'm at 109 Shadeland Court here in Murfreesboro. I actually live closer to the back of the neighborhood, so where we are takes us down Gazebo Park and then out to Asbury and onto Old Nashville Highway. And I moved here from West Palm Beach, Florida. I moved here because we wanted to have a place that was more like what I grew up with, which was a little bit smaller town, where people still waved at each other and knew their neighbors. And so that's what brought myself. My sister Madeline spoke earlier, my father Jim spoke earlier, and we've brought quite a few people here who are searching for that same feel. None of us have the impression that growth isn't going to happen. We moved here and we helped that growth. And what I'd like to say from my perspective is we would appreciate growth that makes sense for the long term, as well as for what's going on in people's lives right now. So everybody's talked about traffic. For me, traffic is a little bit easier because I get to go out Old Nashville Highway. What's not easier, though, is that a lot of other people have figured that out and go at breakneck speed through our neighborhood in the back now. So when we start talking about how putting in one road is going to alleviate the problem, people are looking for the path of least resistance. And if they're trying to get to Thompson Lane by way of Wilkinson Pike or Medical Center Parkway, unfortunately, the back way is the best way right now, which means now we've increased traffic going down Old Nashville Highway, which is right by our beautiful battlefield. So that's my experience. I try not to use the front of the neighborhood if at all possible because of the exact issues that they're talking about. And my other concern really is just the density that we're talking about bringing in there. We have 2 children, they're teenagers. They want to be around other people and we want them to be safe, but there's no walkways right now that are really going to allow that for them to go outside of our neighborhood. And in addition to that, like, we're concerned about, as I said, that increased traffic going through our neighborhood, which has already started to happen. I would also really encourage that, that, as other people have talked about, like, promises that are made but are not kept leave a pretty bad taste in the mouth. And so for our neighborhood to have been promised the berm or an increase in drivability down Wilkinson Pike and it's never happened, it doesn't say much about the concern for the people who are living here now. And so being part of a family that came here and brought people here, it would be very sad not to be able to encourage more people to come here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Easley.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be here. My name is Paul Wisdom, and I'm here representing Charlene Hinkle. She was not able to be here tonight. She lives at 2666 Wilkinson Pike, so right across the street and down one lot from the development. The developer mentioned a few things several times, talked about it being zone mixed use, and talked about commitment and how important commitment is. Yet in this letter from November of 2016, when they were trying to get it zoned for mixed use from residential, which is what you spoke about, Mayor, they said they were making a commitment to us. They're requesting the elimination of the 100-foot Wilkinson Pike buffer along the entire length of the property, and they're proposing to incorporate a new landscape berm, be 5 foot tall, and run along the south side of Wilkinson Pike the entire length. And they said they would construct this the next growing season, and it wasn't done. So I don't think it's fair to put a lot of emphasis on it being zone mixed use when the city did their commitment to allow it to be rezoned, but they didn't honor their commitment to do what they said they would do. And that's kind of what I'm concerned about, is that the development will be done as it's being committed to. So there are really 3 things that Ms. Hinkle is concerned about, and I'll try to express it. One, I just want to say I appreciate you all and all that you all do, and the planning. The city planners are great here. She's not from Tennessee, but she's a proud citizen of Tennessee, and she's especially proud to be a citizen of Rutherford County and to call Murfreesboro her home. She and her husband moved here over 2 decades ago to enjoy the community that we have, and she's enjoyed this part of her life more than any part of her life living in Tennessee, and wants to continue enjoying it. And so the concerns we have are the commitment is one. The other concern is the traffic, as it's already been discussed. And you really have to live there or be there to use that road to understand how bad the traffic is, how much it's changed over the last 2 decades from when it was called Manson Pike, and the difference in the traffic. And it's just really, I don't see how it can get better by having this many residences that will be using that road. So traffic is a big concern of hers. And the other concern, which may be the largest, is the drainage concerns. The minutes from this meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission on September 2nd says that there would be improvements made to install a swale from the corner of their property to release the runoff towards the roadside ditch along Wilkinson Pike and go underneath Willow Oak. Well, I want to show you that roadside ditch. Do you think it's handling the water? I don't know how the public can see this, but across the street is that roadside ditch they're referring to. And if they're not able to contain the water now, how are they going to be able to contain the water that's created or needed to be managed that's running off all of these roofs and all of this pavement onto this road?
Thank you, Mr. Wisdom.
Appreciate it. And
Appreciate you.
Our recommendation, we'd love to have the road situation and the drainage situation corrected.
Thank you.
And I have pictures I can leave with the council. Thank you.
Mr. Wisdom, do you want to take that with you? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lauren Rowland, and I'm attending as the most senior local representative of Big V Properties and the Avenue Murfreesboro. Big V Properties recently acquired the Avenue from Hines, and I was retained as a general manager. I moved here in 2005, the initial development of the Avenue, and have been here ever since. So I invested both personally and professionally in Murfreesboro and the surrounding areas. I'm here this evening to urge the City Council to approve the rezoning variance. The Avenue, like all retail centers across the U.S., have seen many tenants struggle to thrive as e-commerce continues to grow. The short-term impacts of COVID-19 have only accelerated this trend. Clary Park's program of 890 residential units will provide a much-needed boost with nearby residents that will become repeat customers for our tenants. Big V intends to own and manage the Avenue for an extended period of time. This is a long-term project for us, and adding a Hines-led community to Medical Center Parkway will only serve to enhance the viability and value of this investment. And as a former employee of Hines for 7 years, I can attest to the integrity and quality of this company. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rowland.
Good evening, Mayor McFarland and council members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Just wanted to give you a few concerns we have from the National Park Service for Stones River National Battlefield. The park is really interested in maintaining some level of that rural character along Wilkinson Pike. It's one of our historic roads, and it played a key role in the Battle of Stones River. We really ask that the city strictly enforce the development commitments made with the previous rezoning for screening with the berm and plantings. Maybe I didn't say my name, I'm sorry. Brenda Pennington, Superintendent, Stones River National Battlefield, I'm sorry. We also are hearing more noise and congestion, and that is an issue for our visitors. Those higher traffic volumes that we have now, and they'll continue to increase on Wilkinson Pike, especially before that road is widened, it'll further degrade the ability of our park visitors to imagine the 2-hour battle that occurred right there in the slaughter pen. And that's one of the most important areas of the battlefield. So it would be really great to have less noise in that area for our visitors. And I think many of you come and you experience the battlefield, recreate there, but we get people from all over the world, and you know, we are the local national park here, and we're partners in this community, and you're important to us. So the increased traffic flow on Wilkinson Pike, it'll lead to greater potential for accidents, and that may continue to damage the park resources. We are constantly trying to repair the fence. I can't tell you how many times our fence is down. And it's dangerous for us to be going out there on that busy road. So I'm concerned about our staff being out there. park has also experienced increased flooding in the areas adjacent to Wilkinson Pike, and as more and more land becomes covered with those non-permeable surfaces, despite the fact that the distance between the park and the proposed development, we're concerned that some of the runoff will continue to flow out of our neighbors' yards and add to the flooding issues on the battlefield. Our fences are flooding, everything drains down into the battlefield. So whatever you can do to help us with that and just protecting the battlefield will be terrific. I thank you for your time and your consideration as you make these important planning decisions for the city's future, and for your continued support to protect the community and to help us be your national park and the partner that we are. We want to be part of this community. We are part of it. So making us accessible is really important and keeping us protected. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Good evening, Mayor. I'm Bill Ketron, City Council. It's a pleasure to be before you tonight. I don't come before you as my elected position. I come before you to speak as a neighbor to this development, and represent, in my elected position, representing the voices of many people who didn't come tonight, who live in this area that will be affected by this development. I think Hines and Mr. O'Shea bring a Class A development to the city, something the city should be proud of. But before you probably vote on this, I ask you to look at two of the serious things that have already been talked about tonight. Traffic and drainage. Those are the two biggest issues that we have. Talked about the berm and protecting, the visual site, but the traffic, this is Wilkinson Pike is the corridor that all local residents travel, because most of other folks don't know about it. And I'm sure many of you go the same direction. If you're going to Sam's, or if you're going to Embassy Suites, or you're going to the interstate, you'll come that direction if you live on that side, the other side of town, because you don't want to stop at 7 red lights on Medical Center Parkway. And unfortunately, one of the designs flaws in the gateway plan that was originally built, and all of you know it, there was not an emergency lane put on the gateway. Unfortunately, when it's jammed up, as it is every day, and you wait till you get around in a few more months, another 30 to 60 days with Christmas coming, how terrible the gateway is. But when you have an ambulance, you have a fire truck, or you have a police car trying to get down Medical Center Parkway, it's almost impossible. Where does the traffic go in order to yield to the emergency services? The majority of ambulances today coming to St. Thomas, Rutherford, come down Wilkinson Pike, whether they're responding or just transporting. Where do the cars go when those emergency rooms or emergency vehicles have their lights on? There is a ditch on each side. There's no place for them to go. Many times in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 4:30, 5 o'clock, the traffic backs up from McDonald's all the way past down to the battlefield. When an emergency car comes down that corridor, where do they go? Into our yards. I don't know how much grass seed that I've purchased to cover up the tire marks where they turn around in my yard, or they go into my other neighbors' yards as well. But the drainage is the biggest issue. And I believe that was scanned over tonight, Mayor, as far as the drainage. And it was my understanding today that your engineering department has not vetted this project. So before you vote on this, I ask you to look at the drainage, because it is a terrible issue. It floods in my yard, it floods in 2 houses down, continues to flood, and like previously said, if you continue to put that much blacktop rooftops in that area, it's just going to continue to get worse. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hello, I am Pat Boland. I live at 2512 West Park Drive. We are the first house in the neighborhood that faces West Park Drive. And I say the same thing about there's no need to go back into it, about the traffic. We see it from our home all the time. We experience it. I would let you know that it's not just car traffic. It's 18-wheelers, dump trucks. This morning, I looked out the window, and there was some type of sports bus about the size of a Greyhound that I could see coming off Gresham Park and going down Wilkerson Pike instead of going down Medical Center Parkway. So, yes, the traffic is bad. And I think we've covered that quite sufficiently tonight for you guys to know, what our issues are with that. One of the things I would like to address is the rezoning to commercial highway on the lot at Gresham Park. When they built the Embassy Suites, the lights from the Embassy Suites were so strong in the neighborhood that you could actually walk through parts of the neighborhood at night without a flashlight. It had that much light. So with it being CH, if you could possibly put a hotel there. And if the lights from the Embassy Suites, as far as it is from our neighborhood, can put light pollution into our neighborhood, you can imagine what it's going to be like. It's going to be like being on an airport runway. But anyway, we would ask that you do not do that rezoning. Now, in our backyard, we are probably about the lowest point in the neighborhood. And we have had times, many times, like maybe about every 3 to 4 weeks, when it rains hard and then it rains, for several hours after that, or maybe 2 hours, we will get anywhere from 2 to 3 feet of water in our backyard. And then it slowly drains and goes down into the park. Now, one of my biggest concerns through all of this is that drainage, because what's going to happen, that water is going to come off that hillside, come across Wilkinson Pike, across the front row of houses that face Wilkinson Pike, into my backyard. And when we had the great flood of, the 1,000-year flood, the water was over our chain link fence by a foot. So, I've gotten different stories about what's going to be happening with the drainage. We know there's going to be a lake there, but, I have my concerns about that, collecting the amount of water that's going to be coming off that hillside. Also, just give me one more minute. Also, when they are building over there, if they take off all of the ground cover prior to having some type of drainage, that water is going to be, it's going to be like a snowy hill. So I really ask you to consider, when we went to the original meeting at the firehouse, we looked at it and said, okay, these are your plans. My main concern, and I voiced it 3 times during the meeting, was the drainage. We were really concerned about the drainage. But we said, we thought there were just going to be 300 apartments. And we said, okay, not too bad. But then it ended up that it was 600 apartments. But anyway, those are our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowling. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak?
Mayor, City Councilman, I'm Deborah Gray, and I live at 2660 Cross Park. I'll say it again, traffic, just in case you didn't hear, and drainage. I want to add also, there's 9 exceptions that they're requesting. 8 of those, the way I see it, are basically infringing on room for people to live. Car spaces at 1.5 cars per unit should be 1470. They're requesting 1078. That's almost 400 spaces less. My math may be incorrect, but I apologize for that if it is. Another example is the density in two of the areas. It's supposed to be 1 acre, 25 dwellings. They're asking for 29 in one area and 32 in another. It's just simply too much to ask Wilkinson Pike to support. Somebody else can have my other 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and I've got wrote down a couple of questions for staff. I don't know who wants to field these. Margaret Ann, Ms. Green may want to ask you to come up too.
Yeah, Mayor, I'll take the easy ones, and Matthew and Margaret Ann will get the hard ones.
All right.
We could do it that way.
Sam,
That'd be great with me.
I think or Mr. Huddleston. So Mr. Huddleston is our Director of Development, but also before that, you are our engineer, correct?
Yes, served in the engineering department for 19 years.
So will you talk to us about drainage?
Sure. Syria does have some drainage challenges. We've watched it over the years. I think Mr. Wisdom's picture I'd seen and maybe Miss Boland's picture and discussed with her after the events. And really, I think with this project and with Wilkinson Pike, we'll have opportunities to improve those drainage conditions. And with other projects we've had in the area, we've actually diverted about 2 square miles of drainage from the lower part of Wilkinson Pike. It's given us some additional capacities in those areas. So I think there's an opportunity with the development plan and with the city's road work to really improve drainage. For the stuff maybe back in West Park itself, we'll only be able to influence what's along Wilkinson Pike and what's running toward Wilkinson Pike. So I think some of those drainage challenges will probably stay in West Park, but we will reduce the impacts, I think, from Wilkinson Pike and also with the development plans we see there.
Can you talk to us about the plans overall? We've talked for some time about Wilkinson Pike. What are the overall plans for Wilkinson Pike?
So Wilkinson Pike is a substandard street. That term doesn't mean dangerous necessarily or unsafe, but it does mean it doesn't meet a standard city condition. We have designed probably about a 95% complete set of plans that would widen that to 3 lanes with curb and gutter and sidewalk. We have incorporated in working with Ms. Pennington, Superintendent Pennington and her staff, a multi-use path to try to link back into the battlefield. As I look back through the Gateway master plan that I brought up tonight, it actually had that multi-use path sketched in there as well, and making those linkages. And so that roadway will provide some additional, what would I say, it's more travelable. We are working on Wilkinson Pike, and I think Superintendent Pennington mentioned to us this road was existing, and we renamed it to the road name that was common in the time of the Civil War. And so that roadway has been there almost 200 years now. And so, but we will provide some improved function to that road. It won't provide any additional capacity. There's still just 1 lane in each direction. We will be able to accommodate left turns. I think one of the challenges on Wilkinson Pike today is once you get on it, there's not a way to get off. There's an opportunity to turn into West Park, and there's an opportunity to turn on Gresham Park. But there are very few left opportunities to have a left turn lane, a dedicated left turn lane. So the biggest improvement there, Mayor, I think, will be adding that continuous center turn lane, which will accommodate those left turns and help reduce some of the conflicts on turns. Making the connection with Willow Oak Trail and Robert Rose Drive. We also think those will be beneficial improvements to help distribute the traffic and give a couple other ways in and out of Wilkinson Pike.
I'm not looking to make headlines in the paper, but a question was asked, do you foresee a 3-lane or a larger road where Wilkinson will continue to go back to Asbury or go to the interstate? And is that in our foreseeable future?
So our 2040 major transportation plan included an extension of Conference Center Boulevard and connection of Asbury and Wilkinson in the area around the Chamber of Commerce and what most people know as the Grove at Williamson Farm. So that concept plan is out there. We haven't had a particular opportunity to maybe pursue those plans with the property owner. We've had some initial conversations there, but they've not went beyond the initial conversation. Our traffic department has studied the Asbury Lane intersection. We've made some short-term improvements there now with some of the striping and signage that's helped there a little bit. There is a potential for another short-term project, or preferably to be able to make some improvements at the Conference Center Boulevard intersection to help with that.
Could I follow up on that? Just as far as the plans that I've seen through either our thoroughfare plan or what was in the paper or what we've talked about multiple times, I mean, they still kind of have the same issue as it relates to capacity. With whatever we do right there, it's still going to get you to Conference Center, which gets you to the interstate. So it still all kind of funnels down to Thompson Lane. So is that another one, and I'm asking here,
Sure.
Is that another one of those things that's it may function better, but it's all going to the same bottleneck that it's going to right now?
Yeah, so if you'll recall, Councilman Lance, one of the things we talked about was that obstacle we call I-24. It's good in that it provides a major transportation corridor through our community, but when we have to interact with that, the only place to do it is at an interchange. And so at Old Fort Parkway and at Medical Center Parkway and at New Salem Highway and Church Street and Joe B. Jackson, we do funnel down there. One of the elements that we included in our major transportation plan were those bridges to cross, to allow the local road to cross over. So we have a couple of those in the works, not necessarily for here. But then the other thing I would add for you is...
Not here?
Not here. The one that would influence this area is quite honestly just a concept. We don't have anything working specifically, but it's it'd be closer. I think you're familiar with the route. It'd be closer to the MTSU Stark Farm properties. But quite honestly, there's no activity in that area that would suggest that we'd have an opportunity to move on that anytime soon. Okay. Medical Center Parkway is proposed to be upgraded to 6 lanes, 3 lanes in each direction from I-24 back to Thompson Lane. Mr. O'Shea mentioned tonight their commitment to build that 3rd lane along their frontage, and as you're all familiar with Medical Center Parkway, you know we've added that 3rd lane along the frontages of properties as they've developed. There will be some parts where the city and or TDOT will have to work together to get that continuous connection from Thompson Lane up to the interstate, including some interchange improvements that I understand TDOT's working on as well.
Last question that we have actually 2 last questions. Why in 2017, and this, I can't remember who asked this, why didn't the buffer get built?
You know, I don't know that I can answer that. Maybe somebody from the development team could give us some insight into that. But you know, is my time up?
No.
Wishful thinking. Somebody maybe behind you back there somewhere. I don't know.
I'm trying to tell you something.
Yeah. We do remember the commitment, and there was some discussion between maybe the property owner at the time and perhaps, Mayor, we had some more closer range plans for Wilkinson Pike and trying to coordinate the construction. I honestly don't recall and don't know why it wasn't built.
All right. And then I guess this goes for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for Ms. Green, Ms. Gray, I think, had made the comment there were 9 total exceptions. Do you know what the total exceptions or variances that are being requested?
Sure. The plan development process allows for an applicant to, see how much I can stall here. The zoning ordinance allows for a plan development applicant to identify exceptions to our regulations regarding parking, setbacks, density, but those exceptions have to be explicitly asked for. If they're not asked for, and in the future you find the plan conflicts with our standards, they have to meet our standards. So page 17 of the program book identifies 9 exceptions to the setbacks, density, and parking. And see if I can find page 17 for you. I'm going to do the Blomley scroll here.
Whoa.
Okay, I have it on the screen.
Okay. Okay.
You've recently had a zoning ordinance text amendment, which I think might make their 5th request not necessary, and that was to allow garages to count toward the minimum off-street parking requirements. You may remember that recently you amended the zoning ordinance for like multifamily and townhomes to allow garages to count toward the minimum parking standards, and I think that was an effort to encourage townhomes with garages where people prefer to purchase and live, as opposed to townhomes with just surface parking, which tend to be converted into rental pretty quickly.
Okay. Thank you. All right, council members, y'all have questions?
Mr. Huddleston, can I ask a question about Mr. LaLance's favorite topic? Would signalizing some of these intersections on Wilkerson Pike help the stacking of traffic back and forth after this development's done?
So, and I'm going to look around to see if Brandon Baxter's here. I don't recall that we did a specific traffic signal analysis on Wilkinson at this point. Yeah, I think our challenge on that, Councilman, is going to be to meet the warrants, and for signalization, there's a industry standard, I guess is the best way to say it, that requires that you demonstrate meeting a reason to put up a signal. And so for a lot of locations where signals are anticipated or proposed, you know, those things are monitored and traffic studies are conducted, and then once the warrants are met, we can install them. I think none of the locations really jump out at me as being locations that will maybe be signalized today. There's a possibility as we move closer to the interstate, it might be a signalized intersection if we could see the Conference Center Boulevard project move forward. I think the left turn would be the ability to have that continuous center turn lane in there would be operationally a good benefit to the traffic that moves through there. And I think it's easy for us to say that the character of that road, the nature of that road has changed over time. Its importance to that community and that area, as far as being able to move traffic in and out of that area, is much more significant now than it was 20 years ago. And because of that, you know, it needs some upgrades to it.
You know that road that goes right in front of the Chamber building? Can we make that? Can we open that up and get rid of those speed bumps? Sorry, only people here know that. Sorry, never mind. I said that for Paula.
You want to withdraw the question? Okay. I would like to maybe double back on the drainage concept that Mr. O'Shea's team, the design team, had proposed, and you know, our city engineering staff haven't had time to evaluate that versus the existing and proposed conditions out there. I believe it has merit, but I think it needs, you know, staff needs some time to review that with the design team to make sure that their concept is sound and it will work with their development, but it'll also work in the future with it the way it is, and then also possibly for it to be modified with Wilkinson Pike. But that's something that I would personally like for us to be able to take back in-house and have an opportunity to vet that a little bit more and maybe bring you some additional
Mr. Lance just had a good
response.
question.
Yes.
I mean, typically, that's done after, because you have to have construction plans to go over all that, or can you have enough information to really look at that right now?
Yes, because of the amount of information we have already along Wilkinson Pike with having a 95% design, plus Mr. Keckley, if you recall him, the villages at Murfreesboro, the assisted living facility there, with their work, and we have a ton of existing information plus the design information on Wilkinson, and so I think we could do a very good analysis of their proposal and take a closer look at that.
Mr. Huddleston, what is the time frame on the improvements to Wilkinson Pike?
So Mr. Griffith gave Margaret Ann and I both some information on that. Right now the projection is to start construction in 2024. So we're...
How long is that?
It's probably an 18-month project. And of course that'd be contingent. We don't have any funding identified for it at this point. That would be a part of the review we do with the mayor and council routinely on the capital, or sorry, Mr. Tyndall, the community investment plan. And so as you recall, we just reviewed that for this current year at the council workshop last Wednesday. And as I recall, there was a direction to staff to bring back a review of transportation projects that we might take off of the future list and bring that back to you for consideration at a future workshop.
Council members.
Question. The accountability, somebody says they're going to do something, how are we going to hold them accountable to do what they're going to do? And of course, we've got the example of why something didn't happen that was promised to happen. So I think you need to speak to that. How are we going to hold people to what they say they're going to do? I know their integrity of Hines and all is wonderful, but the issue is, how do we help people to...
Yeah, so there's several mechanisms set up in our development process for accountability. I think the example given tonight of the berm was probably an exception that really doesn't fit our development model. It was a extra, meaning outside of a development plan commitment that they made. It was done for rezoning. We understand that. And so basically at that time we were counting on the commitment that the developer made to follow through on his commitment. More specifically for development plans where there are timelines and commitments made with phases of projects, staff through the city development process would not allow them to move to the next stage or phase of development, whatever that might be, receiving a permit, a certificate of occupancy, without that being complete and functional, or without say a financial surety, a bond or a letter of credit or cash standing in its place. And so we do have a lot more mechanisms when it's tied to approval of plans that we would use to make sure that the Hines project stayed on track with their commitments in the plan booklet.
Let me ask one. I think Mr. O'Shea is probably going to have to answer this question.
I'll gladly yield the microphone.
Okay.
I'm going to need you to, though.
Okay. Well, it's okay. You want to
Afterwards.
ask?
No.
What parts of this project is Hines going to manage, and which parts of this project are you going to sell?
Let me maybe pull up the master plan.
Okay.
So here's kind of the overall master plan, and the way we manage a project like this. I gave you an example of Palencia in St. Johns County in Florida, which is a 20-year plus development. We establish covenants and restrictions that are put in place up front. Those are recorded against the property, and those bind any property owner to have to come to an architectural review process and then have to maintain standards of maintenance of the property long term. And there are enforcement mechanisms by that property owners association to make sure that all of those things are done. And that's how we routinely manage, thousands, manage projects all over the world like that. In terms of our plans to do vertical development within Clary Park, we're planning on developing both phases of the multifamily. So, phase 1 and phase 2, the total 600 apartment units, we are planning to directly develop those. The townhomes, as I've mentioned, we've already selected a builder, David Weekley Homes, that we've worked with many times, and obviously worked with them through the process of coming up with the architecture that we've put forth today. As we get to developing commercial properties, we'll be out marketing those commercial properties to end users. And whether it's a restaurant, a bank, they typically obviously self-develop and own and manage that property. We'll have our architectural design standards that we'll work through with them. That begins from the first time we talk with them, and then obviously they'll be going through the Gateway Design Standard process, that Margaret Ann manages. So there'll be, kind of 2 layers of architectural review that will occur.
I noticed that there were a limited number of uses that you were permitting. You said 65 as opposed to 95 or something.
Correct.
Where is that list?
Let's see. It's forward. So there's a chart, within the code book. Chart 1 in the code book provides all the various types of land uses and lists all the different zoning categories and has checks as to what you can and can't do. And what we did is we worked with Margaret Ann and the balance of the team to go through and pare that list down to come up with a reduced list of the uses that are permitted within each zone within the community there. So you've got the 7 zones and what uses are permitted in the various zones.
So these are a covenant that's written into the contract, or how do you restrict that to happen?
Right. So there'll be 2 mechanisms. One, we've worked out language with Mr. Ives and our attorney that there'll be a covenant recorded that goes over all of the CH land that is recorded in the public documents that then says, these things are restricted. And that covenant will be enforceable by not only the developer, the Property Owners Association, but it's also going to be enforceable by the city. So that's one. And then the second way is obviously this zoning document exists. And anyone that comes forth with a proposal to the city, they have to comply with the zoning document and would go through the Gateway Design Standard, Gateway Design process. And if this doesn't comply, if the use doesn't comply with this, they would not be approved.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Ives might be able to provide more clarity if
Mr. O'Shea,
need be.
could you tell us, in the original plans you had single-family homes. Could you tell us why you took those out?
Well, I can. And I'd maybe like to explain the process a little bit, because I think the reference to single-family homes is I don't know, frankly, it's a little unfair. Randy and I met with, and Tommy met with Mr. Whitaker and the city manager back in July of last year. It was a first meeting, introduction. Kind of the idea was, hey, the purpose of the meeting was for me to find out what uses might be permitted here. And we talked about a range of them, everything from all the different commercial uses and including single family. And I brought up single family because we had a specific example of a project in Jacksonville where we have a mix of townhomes and detached single family homes that are only 6 feet apart. The code there provides a very small setback between the units. When we got into looking at the details of the code here, it requires a 10-foot side setback. Therefore, each house would have to be 20 feet apart. And you start thinking about where we would end up with a price point with having to do that. It's basically taking 2 townhomes that we're looking to sell at a minimum of $275,000. So to get the equivalent value, you're looking at a home that's over $550,000. And we just don't think that there's a buyer that's going to be looking to buy a single-family home in this location at $550,000. That's one. And then the other thing is really the target market of who we're looking to attract. It's young professionals, maybe empty nesters. They don't want a yard. They don't want a single-family home. They want less maintenance. And the common maintenance that's provided within a townhome community is really what we think those buyers are looking for. So that's how we got to where we are today.
All right, thank you. Sure. Ms. Margadale. So how many apartments complex and the number count we have in the pipeline as of now, not counting the 600 that they want to bring on?
Sure. I'll give you that number. The Gateway overlay district, just the properties that have the GDO overlay. So if they're nearby but they're not zone GDO, I didn't include them. But they currently have 2,806 apartment units available or under construction. So 2,806. 1,578 of those are on the east side of I-24, so on this side of 24, and the rest are on the other side of 24. If you counted this, it would be 3,406. Currently, it's 2,806.
I had Gerald Lee do a density view, how I typically will do in a corridor, and there's 4,900 apartment units within 1.5 miles of this particular development already.
Without this.
Without this one.
Without this.
Yeah. Okay. 4,900.
Mr. Lee has a widget that I used to identify them, and I qualified my number because I knew that there were some that were nearby that I wasn't counting in my number, and the map is on the screen, the dashboard that I used to find those apartments.
Yeah, the difference must be outside the overlay, is that right?
Yep, so there's some that are adjacent to, but not within the gateway.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Lance?
Question for Mr. Huddleston. Just, I want to get, just to make sure I'm clear on something as it relates to this drainage issue, and it's really a little more about style than it is about function. I think I know where the water drains across the road, and I think based on a comment that the county mayor made, I think that confirms sort of what I was thinking. Can you confirm for me, if you'll scroll back to kind of the map of this project, I just want to get in my mind right something here. So go to the satellite map, the satellite image, so I can.
I'm not familiar with their.
There was one up there a little bit ago. There it is.
That one?
Yeah. So you've got this property. Then you've got the Hale property, which has the RS-15 at the northern boundary there, and then you've got the villages, right?
Yes.
That's all part of that villages.
And then Willow Oak Trail crossing over to
Willow Oak Trail.
Wilkinson, Robert Rose and Wilkinson. Yes.
So is it your interpretation that the water crosses kind of more like behind the villages, which would be right over by the county mayor's house, if I'm remembering right, or is it? Let me ask you this way. Is the drainage problem in this area caused by the Hale property?
I would say the drainage problem along Wilkinson Pike is caused by the underlying topography.
Topography on the Hale property, or does it go all the way down?
It's in this region.
I know it's unfair with you not having the maps in front of you, but and you know, I don't want to ask a person in the crowd, but I think that the drainage is right there where all the potholes are. It's very close, if I remember, to where Willow Oak Trail comes out. Does that sound like it's right?
So yeah, they're on both sides of Wilkinson Pike. There are several areas that are closed depressions because of the existing topography. Had nothing to do with roads, had nothing to do with homes. It's just Middle Tennessee and Murfreesboro geology.
Drain somewhere.
Or it doesn't drain at all, or it's all internally drained. And so some of those areas are close to and adjacent to Wilkinson Pike. Some have had some modest drainage improvements and some have not. And so on the gateway side of Wilkinson Pike, as I recall, there are a three closed depressions on the Gatton property and the Hale property that when they overtop have the potential to go into the right-of-way of Wilkinson Pike and or along Wilkinson Pike to the next area. Some of that water, I think, crosses into, and I can't remember the name of the subdivision, but they're at West Park, and then into the internal drainage system at West Park.
Okay.
And then further to the east, I'm going to use the telestrator here. That's a TVA easement, historic low area that overtops into the park. In that area, we have redirected about 1,000 acres upstream of that to go directly to the Stones River, which helped with some, but there's still, up at Wilkinson Pike, there's still times and opportunities when Wilkinson Pike overtops there. And then the next location, I think, would be at and I'm not sure it's going to be on this map, but at Thompson Lane and
Who owns that part where the easement is?
that's actually part of, I think Mr. Smith's still in the audience here, but that is part of the Gatton property, and I think that is in a Stormwater Management Association. And so there's a management organization that's created by the developer, Mr. Smith and Mr. Gatton, that established that as a regional drainage area for the developments on the Gatton property who contribute to it. And so there are a couple of those that they've set up out there for the perpetual maintenance of it. It also contains a significant TVA easement, and so it's kind of off limits for development as well.
Yep. Okay.
And we've observed that area to overtop quite frequently, into Wilkinson Pike and cause a road closure there because of an undersized pipe. Really, there's several thousand acres that want to drain there, and I think it's a 15-inch pipe. When it misbehaves, it gets over the road there as well. And so, as I've often said when standing up here, when we consider development plans, we have an opportunity with the construction project to include some significant drainage improvements, whether that's a road project or a project by the city or a project by the private developer. So it gives us a great opportunity to leverage that other construction work while also improving drainage in the area. And we always look for that opportunity. And I think that was the proposal of the developer to offer up a potential remedy there that could be executed with this project rather than waiting for the city's road project.
Can I get Ms. Margaret Ann back up? I think we talked about, a couple of people asked about density. Can you give some kind of clarification about density compared to the units, compared to straight zoning?
Sure. So the mixed-use district is only allowed to be in areas that are within the Gateway Design Overlay District because we know that there's additional scrutiny on the property. The mixed-use zoning allows residential uses by right, and specifically multifamily residential uses by right. When it was created, it was envisioned that there would be horizontal and vertical mixed use. So you would have a master planned area, you might have apartment here and commercial, or you may have vertical mixed use. We haven't seen as much vertical mixed use as we hoped for. But this area was designed with the highest density in all the city of Murfreesboro because we expected there to be compensation for design standards. And with the vertical mixed use, you can really do cool things. Several years ago, council told staff that they were concerned with the amount of apartments that started consuming the land in the mixed use district. So we had master plan areas and we had multiple apartment communities starting to be built really close to each other. So we wrote a zoning ordinance amendment that let the property maintain the density of 25 dwelling units per acre, but added a restriction on the property on the master planned area. So on all this, on the master planned area, we said the land area that you can take up is restricted so that you don't have 4 different apartment complexes on one master plan development. So on properties that are greater than 10 acres, we said 25% of the area, so if you do the parcels that are mixed use, can be devoted to residential. So 25 dwelling units per acre, and also only 25% of the land area can be residential, because we didn't want residential to continue consuming our high-quality commercial properties where we see a lot of investment come back to the city. On properties that are 10 acres and less already, you can't just create a 10-acre parcel. We defined the allowable land area as being 50% of the land area can be consumed with residential, but it still has the same 25 dwelling units per acre. There's no scenario, of course, with this property where it would be allowed to meet that standard. So the standard would be 25 dwelling units per acre, and the residential cannot consume more than 25% of the land area. Did I answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a question about zoning? I just don't recall this. Is a hotel permitted in a mixed use?
Yes, sir.
So when we change, if the request is for commercial highway, so what changes by making it commercial highway, what are they permitting, what are we permitting that we're not permitting under what its existing zone, as it relates to a hotel?
So, of course, hotels are permitted. The mixed-use district doesn't allow some of those uses that we think might be incompatible with residential uses. Our concept of mixed use was that you would have people living nearby. And so some of those commercial highway uses that are allowed, car dealerships wouldn't be appropriate.
I'm sorry, I'm not making myself clear.
Okay.
Let's take the corner of Grisham Lane and Wilkinson Pike, the Area 1. Got me? Okay, the thought or the option is a hotel there. Under the existing MU, it could be a hotel.
Yes.
Under the proposed new zoning, it could be a hotel.
The difference between mixed use and commercial highway is commercial highway does not allow residential uses, doesn't allow those apartments. And commercial highway, or mixed use allows apartments or condos by right. Commercial highway doesn't allow them. And so it was just a good faith effort of saying that they had no intention of putting residential uses on those properties.
Yeah, that's
So
correct. Yeah,
that's
I
what it
got
was.
that. I was just trying to see if there was something different that was allowed in, if it was going to be a hotel, was there something that a height or something requirement that would be allowed? So basically, now they could put a hotel there and.
That's right. You could leave it mixed use, and they probably would achieve most of their goals as well. It was just because mixed use allows apartments. Council sometimes.
You would try to restrict that.
Yeah, and their mixed use and commercial highway have maximum height standards. Commercial highway is 75 feet. Mixed use is 75 feet on multifamily, 150 on commercial. But the actually overlay district goes further. And the subject property we're looking at has 2 overlay districts on it, GDO 1 and GDO 2. GDO 2 is what runs 250 feet deep south of Wilkinson Pike. So if you're looking at the map, probably this line is the GDO 2 line. And that GDO 2 has much lower height standards than the GDO 1, which is what's to the south. So this is 2 and that's 1. The GDO 2 limits height more than the commercial highway or the mixed use district.
And they still have to abide by the GDO height requirement.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember what the GDO 2 height requirement is?
Yes, I do. GDO 2 says offices can be 75 feet, other commercial 45 feet, hotel 75, and hospital 75.
Would there be any difference in terms of if it's mixed use, there has to be the master plan and our staff, we could say, well, that we don't want a hotel to be right there on that corner. We want you to push it back off the road a little bit farther or whatever. It needs to be on the other side of the development. I mean, would it be true that if it was mixed? And I think I know what the essence of your question is too, because I had that written down. Would the only difference be if it's commercial highway as it sits right now in this proposal, does there still have to be a master plan for that particular piece of property? Is that any different as far as what we would do? I mean, or just because it looks like it's a smaller piece, would we treat that piece separately? There's not much you can do if it's that one little piece, right?
We absolutely wouldn't treat it separate. A master plan is regardless of the base zoning. Our subdivision process requires master planning, but an even more in-depth effort is required because it's in the Gateway Design Overlay District. Because it's in the Gateway, it requires this master plan, and there's a checklist in our zoning ordinance that talks about what needs to be there. So CH properties require a master plan, mixed-use properties require a master plan, and any type of zoning district in the Gateway requires that master plan. The master plan would generally be reviewed and approved by Planning Commission and wouldn't come to City Council, so it wouldn't be something probably that you might have those kind of comments you just mentioned, but Planning Commission could make some additional comments.
And the one question that was raised about light pollution, basically things, how is that addressed in a development like the center proposed?
Sure. Citywide, we have lighting and photometric standards. I generally hear a lot of complaints about our standards because people think they're too restrictive. They haven't always been in place, but we do have them. And so essentially what they say is that your light spillover can't exceed half a foot candle beyond the property line, and that is a pretty low standard. They also say that your pole heights is based on the height of your building. And so most poles cannot be more than 20 feet tall. If you have a really tall building, then of course it can go higher, or industrial buildings allow more. I've seen an evolution from traditional type light to LED. I feel like I get a lot less complaints about lighting today with our standards and with LED lights. I find that LED is more easily manipulated. So if you have a pole near your property line, there are shields that you can put on the bottom and throw the light inside the site. Actually, it's my opinion that sometimes my battle more is wanting more lighting on the private drives, more lighting in parking lots and access ways. We even, with the design guidelines, took our lighting standards a bit further. Our standards are maximum, saying you can't exceed these limits. You can't cause glare, and you can't light up a neighbor. But our design guidelines went a little bit further and said, well, if you are townhomes or you are apartments, you have to light to minimum standard, meaning you have to put lights in, you have to put them in the parking lot, you have to put them where people are, you have to put them on walking trails. And so, and the gateway, of course, requires architectural lighting on the buildings, which I think provides nice nighttime interest.
Mr. Lance?
No,
Okay.
I mean, go ahead, Sean.
Okay. All right.
I don't have any more
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any more questions for staff?
Let me ask one more question. Mr. O'Shea, could you address this? The idea of diversity and as the product, we were saying that was the staff's concern, was diversity of the product.
Hey, Bill, if you don't mind. Hey, Bill.
Could you address that?
Bill, if you'll pull your microphone down, we can't.
I'm sorry.
We couldn't hear your
I'm
question.
sorry.
Sorry.
Wasn't speaking loud enough, but could you, that was a couple of the concerns that the staff had about diversity of the product and the porches and patios. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So what we've done in terms of the design of the townhomes is we've come up with 3 separate elevations that each have diverse architecture. I can't get to them right now. But I could refer you to the plan book. I guess you don't have those in front of you, right? Try to get to.
You may want to get somebody to bring it up there. Matt? Scroll down.
So what we tried to do with the townhome design, and what we always try to do is look at what's around the area. And given that we're adjacent to single-family homes on the other side of Wilkinson Pike, we really tried to design something that we felt fit with that architectural character, because we wanted to bring the density of the project down as we addressed Wilkinson Pike. So that was the idea behind a 2-story product. We wanted to have porches on them, and felt that the porch elements really fit with these styles of architecture, whereas a front porch doesn't really fit with more of a brownstone style, which is intended to be more of an urban concept. It comes right down to the street, and it really doesn't provide for front living in the community.
Mr. O'Shea, are you considering this a brownstone?
No, sir.
Okay.
No. I mean, the challenge with the brownstone is it really doesn't fit for the lifestyle we're trying to promote. We want people to live to the front yard, into their front porch, and do that by either the front porch itself or on the interior units providing the patio.
Okay. It sounded like you answered the question like it was a brownstone. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. And so within the community, there'll be a mix of 3 different styles of architecture. I would imagine that when we get to the final site plan design too, that our builder will bring forth various of color palette as well. And we'll typically have, 3 or 4 different color palettes for buildings so that, you've got more diversity of the color in addition to the diversity of the architecture. And all of that, that we still have to go back through the site plan review process with the staff to do that. And if you look at the site plan itself, by the nature of the way it's laid out, you rarely have more than 2 or 3 buildings next to one another. And so, what you start doing is even if you're coming down the main road, you've got one type of building here, then a second, then a third. So you're not seeing that other type of building, till you're another couple hundred feet down the roadway. And in most cases, you really have very few locations where you have a view of more than one or two buildings at a time because of the curvilinear nature of the layout here. So we feel like by having 3 different product types, and that's, when you look at most of the townhome communities in the area, they don't have that. They really have kind of one architectural style. It's all brick. It all kind of looks the same. We really felt like the diverse architectural pattern would be richer than having just all brick product that didn't provide that. That's why we headed in this direction. Frankly, we felt like it was a better solution than just doing all brick product. We obviously want the city to be excited about it, and we want to work to get to that point if we're not there today. So this is the 3 different styles, and each one of them provides very different character in terms of the way that the architecture looks and feels, and the color palettes will also provide diversity as you move along down the street.
And the reason for the 14 instead of the 18 that was recommended, the 18 inches,
Yeah, there's a real structural reason why. What my builder has explained to me is that when they're doing their slab construction, that they have to do a deep foundation, a relatively deep footer because of frost in Tennessee, and that they can come up 14 inches above grade and still be able to do that in a cost-effective construction manner. If they have to go above that, my understanding is they have to go to more of a stem wall construction, and it adds cost to the floor. And our perspective is that we're already at the top of the market in terms of pricing. We want to allow homeowners some ability to spend that money on things like upgraded flooring or other things that we think will add to it. And we do feel like that 14 inches provides the separation we're looking for. It provides 2 steps up, from the grade in front. That gives kind of a nice feel for the porch area. And I guess one thing that I didn't get a chance to explain before, I'll take one quick minute, is why we don't have porches on the interior units. As we've stated, all the units have to be garage loaded. So you have the garage in the rear. That means all of the living space on the first floor is between the garage and the front of the house. So the only natural light you're getting into the first floor is through the windows on the front. If you put a front porch over that, it makes that interior space very dark. You're going to have a living room, a kitchen, and a dining room that are all in that space. And so that's why we use the porches on the corners where we have windows on the sides, and on the interior units we're doing a nice patio space so people still have that front space to live and interact with their neighbors, but have natural life inside the unit. So again, we're not doing it because we don't want to do it. There's real thought on the livability of the units for people that are going to buy these.
Mr. O'Shea, are there going to be rental restrictions in the townhome areas?
Yeah, was one of the things that the mayor asked early on. We have a specific provision in here that says that this can't be converted to a, build for rent community and be sold, and developed and sold as a rental community.
I'm not talking about the whole community. Can someone buy one of these and rent it out themselves, or a property management company rent an individual unit out? Is there going to be a restriction against rental properties?
We haven't written anything into the code. We typically, in our covenants, we generally will require, people to do 6-month or year longer-term leases so that we don't have kind of the short-term Airbnb kind of things. That's a standard provision in our covenants.
Okay.
Wait, I don't understand that. You said typically you have what? You're talking
about within the covenants.
You're talking about the townhomes.
Yeah, I'm talking about the townhomes.
Yeah, within the covenants that will govern the townhomes, we will typically write in a restriction that limits anyone looking to rent it. So if you own it personally and you want to rent it out, you can't do it like an Airbnb style. You have to rent it out for a longer term, 6-month, year.
But rentals are allowed just on a 6-month or longer basis.
Yeah, I mean, we write, to date we haven't prohibited it. It hasn't come up as a question or a concern other than as the, as the bulk sale.
All right, any other questions for Mr. O'Shea? Okay. Council members, do y'all have any more comments?
I'll make a few, Mayor. Obviously, planning staff, our staff spent a lot of time on this. Appreciate the work that's been done, and I know the developer's been very patient as well. It was interesting. We spent the vast majority of our time, at least it feels like, on the planning side, talking about the townhouse product and talking about specifics related to that. And, there was not a lot of feedback from a lot of the people that we've heard from tonight. From a feedback standpoint, we did not talk a lot, or at least as much as I think we've talked about tonight, the potential water issue, drainage issue. I do think there's been some great points brought up about that needs to be studied more. And so, I think it's more appropriate to defer this than there is to make a vote on it tonight, but that's just my view. Obviously, I supported it coming through Planning Commission. I think the project would be good for the city. I think there's a lot of value to a mixed-use product. I think we're lucky to have the developer interested. But I think there's probably still some questions, a lot of which came up tonight. So if we can keep talking about it, or I'll make a motion to defer.
Yeah, I don't want to defer it personally. I'm normally pretty good for that, but I don't really think the drainage issue is going to be the deal changer. I think, frankly, eventually Sam will work that out. I really don't understand how that works, and I am worried about it from a standpoint of them doing what they say they're going to do and making sure that the drainage does get fixed like it says. To me, there's a lot of things, traffic and drainage are important and obviously big deals and obviously are problems. There are a lot of other issues that I think, just that frankly are bigger picture than what that is as it relates to the density and whether or not we should be doing this from a budgetary standpoint, and whether or not, look, the reality of this walkability issue. I started thinking about this, and it almost makes me laugh a little bit, just kind of smile. But how many people have I ever seen walk across Medical Center Parkway from Henley Station to the Avenue? I literally think it's zero ever. I literally don't think I've ever seen somebody cross Medical Center Parkway, and to think that I would do this for that reason and to look at it like that. I just don't, I just personally, my opinion is I just don't really agree with that. I think, this thing is going to have an impact on schools. Bill, this is his kind of cup of tea here, but, we just approved as a body 600 plus units that are in the Cason Lane zone, the Burns development. That I called the school folks. They estimate that's going to be somewhere in the 150 student range. They told me that they would estimate with this mix of apartments and townhomes that this would be in the 100 to up to maybe 140 range. And we're talking, so that's 10% of a school or more. And we know what the cost is. Do we get the benefit from changing it from what it is to this? The density issues. Another bigger picture issue here for me is that if we're gonna ask our staff, there's one side of this that says that the developers say, we've spent 10 months going back and forth on this, and we hear this all the time. I've spent all this time going through y'all's development process, and we've made all these changes back and forth. That's also 10 months of our staff's time and our taxpayer dollars. And the fact that we've been having these conversations with them 10 months and telling them what the problems are for 10 months, and they won't change it, they won't come up to it, that makes me worry on a lot of levels. That makes me worry on the drainage level. That if we say, hey, we think the drainage ought to be this, our staff says that, and they just say, well, we don't. What happens? Because we've said for 10 months, these are the issues that we have, and they say those aren't issues to us. And so I think it sends an awful message to the citizens, to the developers, to everybody involved, that if our staff can't recommend something, it still goes through Planning Commission and we approve it. Why would the next developer go through the problem? Why don't they just bring it straight to us and forget about that whole process? I just think those things are significant. I don't want to go down the entire list here. This is the perfect development. If we had impact fees in place already, a lot of these things would be at least a little easier to talk about. The cost of the school issues. We're going to have to, with the number of people that will move here, we're going to have to add, whatever the number is for whatever we want to use for our ratio, 8 or 10 police officers. we got to add teachers, you know, I mean, the ongoing costs of this are substantial. We also talk commonly among this group publicly about multifamily and the differences in what we see in the multifamily developments between corporate-owned developments and developments that are owned by people locally here. I think Hines is probably a really good company. You know, look, I'm gonna say it. There's a couple of I've had a conversation, and there's a few of these things that have gone on that, you know, the reason I asked about the Hale property, I mean, you know, well, you know what? I'm not even gonna go. You know, so look, I'm gonna keep moving. Mr. Halliburton, I ran Mr. Halliburton the other day, and I said, hey, Mr. Halliburton, I read some stuff in the minutes and whatnot. Did you expect there to be brownstones, that type of development in this when you voted for it? And he said yes, that there was some conversation right along the time of the vote, and that there was indicated to him that there was going to be those types of changes made, and they're not. And so, you know, I asked him, I said, well, I'm looking at the book, the new book, it's not in there. And so I'm fearful of a pattern. I'm fearful of what, you know, staff telling us what we shouldn't, you know, that this is not something that we should do. And I don't agree with it generally anyway, that this is the right thing for the gateway of our, I mean, look, the reason you got to have different, when we look at, I can't scroll the screen up, but the reason you got to have different architecture on those edge units, you know, the one that they had them highlighted out on the edges, you know, the end over here is different than the other ones, is because the rest of it is less quality than what the gateway desires. I mean, I think about this. We spent almost $1 million extra of taxpayer dollars on our fire station down the street to bring it to gateway standards. Y'all remember I asked in the meeting, do we really need to have a fire station that's at gateway standards, because this is taxpayer dollars, and, you know, do we really need to do that? And the body as a whole, and I agreed in the end, hey, it's not fair, right? We shouldn't ask everybody through that corridor to come up to a standard, and we don't live it ourselves. I think you were the one who said it. And this doesn't. Oh, so where are we going here? I mean, so, look, I don't probably have to say any more. I'm not going to say any more unless I have to, but.
I want to add. So the past couple days, I've actually sat out on West Park Drive in my car in the morning, in the afternoon, watching traffic. I've talked to Mr. O'Shea several times. He's been very good about getting back to me and asking me if I was good with information. I didn't even know about the berm issue until one of the citizens brought it up. At one point, it took me about 22 minutes to pull on to Wilkerson Pike from West Park because of traffic stacking. And we're talking about in the middle of COVID. We're not talking about in a regular time frame. I was telling a gentleman earlier, I was out on a Saturday showing houses in West Park subdivision, and I waited so long to try to turn around, I actually reversed back and went out to Asbury Road. So that's without adding 890 more residential units to the already congested area. Then when you add on this berm issue that should have been taken care of 3 or 4 years ago, I think I've seen everything I've got to see too.
I'm gonna make a motion that we deny the application.
Second.
Motion second. Yes, Mr. O'Shea.
I thought we had a
Hold on a
motion
second.
on the,
Wait a second.
Madeline.
She can't.
Madeline's talking.
yes, I thought we had a motion on the floor to defer this.
There was
No,
That was not a motion.
No, we didn't.
I'm sorry.
There was, yeah.
Yes, sir, Mr. O'Shea.
I'd really just, you know, respectfully request the opportunity to work on this a little bit more with staff. I'm very respectful that staff has spent a lot of time working with us. We've been trying very hard to get to something that, you know, that we think worked. We thought, you know, we got to planning commission and we were literally down to whether there were shutters, a couple inches on the foundation. We were down to what I would say are relatively minor issues. The question of whether it was a brownstone or not a brownstone really just came up at that meeting. What we talked about doing was the units on Robert Rose we would make that way. We're willing to work with you, and we're willing to get to something that you're, you know, we think we can deliver a fantastic project here for the city. And we'd like an opportunity to just spend a little more time working on that, given the investment we've made to date here in Murfreesboro. Respectfully request that.
We do have a motion and a second. So any discussion on the motion and the second? Okay. All right, Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Abstain.
Abstain.
She said, I think,
You say abstain?
Yes, because I want further information.
okay.
So I need further information. So it'll be a denial.
I didn't get it. I think
Okay.
it's an abstain.
So your vote is abstain?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. LaLance?
I mean, I tend to deny, right?
Aye is to
Yeah,
deny.
aye.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. Shacklet?
No.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. All right, we'll now move into scheduled public hearing for Costco Plan Signage Overlay District. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Mr. Ives brought to our attention that the Costco development agreement is on a timeline that's such that the Costco PSO request, the Planned Signage Overlay District request, needs to be on a little bit of a different track than would normally follow going through the Planning Commission and City Council process. It is scheduled for a public hearing before Planning Commission on November the 4th. And what we propose to do is to have first reading before council on November the 5th. We'll make a presentation at that meeting, but there's not enough time to advertise for a public hearing at that meeting. We would ask for your consent to have the first reading on November the 5th, and then the public hearing and second reading on November the 19th. And so first reading November 5th, public hearing and second reading on November the 19th. We would ask for your consideration of this proposed modified schedule for Costco.
Okay. Can we get a motion for the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye. We have Planning Commission recommendations to schedule public hearings. Mr. Blomley, when you want us to schedule?
Yes, sir. Mayor McFarland, we have 4 additional public hearings that we would like for you to schedule on November 19th. So that'd be a grand total of 5 public hearings that evening. We think that we can accommodate all 5 public hearings in one evening.
When you say grand total, it kind of makes it sound a lot more.
Well, as you know, some public hearings take longer than others.
Yeah.
What's the date again?
November the 19th for the Costco and these 4.
All right. Can we get a motion for November the 19th?
So
Can't
moved.
believe we're already talking about
Second.
Thanksgiving. Motion and second.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris?
Aye.
Mr. LaLance?
Aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet?
Aye.
Mr. Wade?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Aye.
Mayor McFarland?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, now you have ordinance 20024 to reassign duties of Disabled Residents Access Committee. This is first reading.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. What I'll be presenting to you is a change that will affect items 10 and 11 on your agenda, so I just want to make that clear up front. Back in 1993, by city ordinance, the city created a committee referred to as the Disabled Residents Access Committee. They were created to hear requests for appeals from residents on making city facilities, services, and events accessible to those with disabilities. The committee has not met in more than 10 years. When ADA was first published in 1991, it was something new and not well understood. And since then, ADA is more commonplace. Buildings are designed, obviously, to be accessible. Events that we have, accessibility is considered strongly. So we haven't had an appeal, like I say, in over 10 years. We would like to take the responsibilities from the Disabled Residents Access Committee and reassign them to the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals. They are scheduled to meet monthly. already. They consist of architects, engineers, contractors, and one citizen. Now, in cases where they would hear an ADA grievance, we've asked that the ordinance change would require that 2 members on the construction board, they'd be supplemental members. They would either have a disability as defined by ADA or would hold a position at MTSU's ADA Compliance Office or their Disability and Access Center. So what we're doing is basically the Disabled Residents Access Committee was very important. They served a great need, but it hasn't been needed in a while. We'd just like to reassign those responsibilities to the construction board. So item 10 is actually the ordinance change. Item 11 is change to city policy. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
There are none, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion
This would be
second. Ms.
on
Wright?
number 10.
On item 10, yes, ma'am.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Sorry. He
Aye.
said aye. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Mayor McFarland. I got ahead of myself.
We can just vote for each other, it's fine. I'm gonna
This
say-
time of
Just trying to
night.
make sure you're awake.
I'm gonna say aye. I mean, I was just looking here in a minute. Can y'all imagine if it was 10-12 as opposed to
I know.
6-12?
Thought about that earlier. I was
Yeah.
like, hallelujah.
All right,
Clock start
Ms.
time.
Russell, the podium's going to be yours. We have adoption of employee I'm
We
sorry.
need to vote on number 11.
Oh, I'm sorry. Adoption of Employee Handbook Policy 2008, Americans with Disabilities Act. This is in conjunction with the motion we just had. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Okay, now we'll go to item 12, and this is the agreement for employee medical benefits. Ms. Russell.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Staff is seeking approval for new agreements for the city's medical, dental, and pharmacy benefits, in addition to extensions for the flexible spending account and supplemental insurance plan. Proposals were solicited for medical, dental, and pharmacy benefits for a 3-year term with an option to extend annually for an additional 2 years. Mercer and the city's benefit consultants, along with the HR team, conducted an analysis of the proposals received. The recommendation is to continue with our current providers, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, Delta Dental, and Elexir Pharmacy, formerly known as Envision. These vendors have provided good services and presented the strongest proposals. The cities also request an extension of our current agreement with WageWorks, who administers our flexible spending account, and Benistar, who provides health insurance through United American for our MED retirees. Funds for these agreements are currently budgeted, and the city will see an annual rate reduction for the medical, dental, and pharmacy, no increase for FSA, and Benistar is being renewed at about a $4,000 annual increase.
Mention the 550.
In addition, I have put on your desk another council communication requesting, staff's requesting approval to amend the WageWorks FSA plan. That would allow, in addition, us to carry over $550 of unused participant health FSA for the following year. The IRS allows 20% of the maximum salary reduction to be carried over the following year. And so there is no impact to the budget, and employees would be able to retain sheltered funds in lieu of losing them. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on either of those.
Any questions?
If there aren't any, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
You also have on your desk an amendment to the WageWorks FSA plan.
That was the one that I just talked about, the $550 to roll over to the next year.
We have to vote on that separately,
Yes.
correct? All right, can we get a motion, please?
So moved.
We got motion and a second.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Item 13 and 14 have been removed. I do want to make a quick comment on item 13. This was not really in conjunction to some of the discussion that we all have been having on the MED plan, the retirement plan. I don't want the retirees or employees of MED to think that we were pulling that off for any specific reason, but I think we all have been responding to employees. We need some time to get recommendations and information back from staff, and that's exactly what they are doing. So please bear with us until we can get that information. The item 14 is off as well. Do we have any licensing?
We do, Mayor. We have a correction for one we currently have already approved for the new entertainment center at 1720 Old Fort Parkway. That was originally requested as a sole proprietor, and it should not have been, so we're asking for this to be corrected. Same location, same actual use, but a different name for the applicant. It's an LLC. Additionally, we have a special event beer permit that we need to have ratified. That was for the Center for the Arts fundraiser. And that's all we have tonight.
All right.
So move.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mr. Wright.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We have no board and commission appointments. Any statements that needs to be paid? Any other business from staff? Any other business from council?
One item, Mayor, can I
Yes,
bring
sir.
it up? To circle back, for anybody that's actually still up and watching, the discussion related to MED and the ongoing discussions about high five calculations, pension calculations. I know we've got a couple of employees specifically that are kind of caught in that gap of decision-making as we're reviewing that. I want to just bring up for the council to consider potentially a commitment on our part that if, and big if, it's decided that we are to deviate from the plan and make a change from a plan where we are making a decision to pay a certain amount that maybe we can't pay today based on what the plan document says, that would be retroactive, so that there are a couple of people that I understand that aren't maybe collecting a pension currently because they're concerned that if they were to take a lower amount, that maybe we would not in good faith see through that piece.
Yeah, because they got to sign something to do it.
Correct. And I think there's some fear that if they do that, they're missing out forever. And I'm not suggesting that we can make a decision about that. I know there's work that needs to be done, but I would like the council to consider saying if we decide that we're going to honor that, that we make it retroactive so those folks can get paid so that they're not hanging out there.
Can we do that?
I think that, I don't know the answer to that specifically because we don't know an answer to a lot of things. I don't think that we could make a commitment at this point in time to anybody until we kind of have worked all through the process at this point. Because I don't know what that would mean. I don't know what it means to the plan, and I don't know what it would mean legally on handling the plans. Plans are very complicated, and you have to do them very specifically.
Do we feel comfortable telling those employees? I know we can't give them specific answers because you have to have lawyers and accountants and actuaries and people who are a lot smarter with those things than we are. But I mean, I would feel comfortable telling those employees that if they are retired and they're not receiving their retirement benefit, that we are going to somehow, we can't guarantee anything, but I hate for somebody not to sign documents based on them not retiring, not retiring.
Look, I don't mind saying either that I think what you're saying is that, I mean, the best message, maybe if we've got to be really careful about what we say, what my message would be is I'm dedicated and committed to making it right. And that's, I mean, I don't know.
That's why we deferred tonight, because we're trying to make it right.
I mean, and that was something, that was what I'm talking about is the whole calculation issue. And look, what we can or can't do, we don't know yet, so we can't commit on that, I think is the essence. But if there are things that we can do, I will just say, if it's all legit and legal and all that, that I would be willing to go back and say, heck yeah, what's fair is fair. I mean, and so I said that. Now, what I've also said, I don't know what all is legal and all that, so I've covered
Yeah.
my,
Well, and we,
Round.
from the council standpoint, really, Ronnie has been, Councilman Martin has been on top of this as well, but, this is not anything that, I'm not throwing blame out, but we want the retirees and the employees of MED to understand that this is not anything that, we didn't manage their pension. I mean, they managed the pension, so we're not trying to take away, you cannot deviate from legally from what the plan says, and so we're trying to go through and figure out that mechanism. So, Adam.
I think Mr. Tyndall makes some very good points. I think one of the things that kind of the distinction here is with these particular individuals who are trying to decide, do I sign this pension application now, and am I potentially signing away something that someone signs something 3 months from now? And so I think there's something there. We can't say that this person or these people will be treated the same way that people who retired 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. But I think you could probably say that people who were employed with MED on 6/30/2020, that you are going to treat them as a class and treat them consistently, whether they apply for benefits or not, whether they've applied for benefits now, whether they apply a month from now, or whether they apply 20 years from now.
Can I ask I got a question about this, just popped to me. It's a math. I mean, this is kind of just, I'm thinking math here, but if one of those employees does not sign the document in order to start drawing, and this takes 4 months, wouldn't that employee have the same concern of whether or not, I mean, it may be harder for us to go back on the 4 months. I mean, do they go back to getting, do we have to wait to start paying them? If they wait until December to sign some paper, they just start getting their benefit in December and it goes forward? I mean, because then you may have missed, you might have gotten 0 for September, October, August, September, October, November.
Yeah.
And you can't go back on that, where I think it's more likely that you can go back on the extra, $82 or whatever the number, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I just, based on how we changed
I'm just concerned. It doesn't feel good at all for somebody to have worked an entire career.
Right on, yeah.
And retire.
This is a bad situation.
And
I mean,
not be getting a paycheck because we don't understand who's on first.
Well, and that's really, and I think Craig's been consistent in saying this. This is not the rank and file employees' problem that this happened. I mean, this is.
Yeah, it's not the employee's fault.
Yeah, this is not the employee's fault, and we absolutely don't want to punish the employee. But then at the same time, if a benefit's been given that's not on the plan,
I get it.
Then you got to make sure that the employees who are going to retire after these employees, that there's plenty of money that's in that plan. And, sitting on the MED board for years, what we've been told is that the plan has been overfunded. So I think, there's no good answer right now. I hope that the MED employees that are watching this, that are those who have either retired or looking to retire, I want you, I guess I'm talking to the camera, we're trying to figure out the right way to handle this.
And we're doing it as quick as we possibly can, and we're not delaying this in any manner, but it does take time because there's a lot of records to go through, and we have to work through, as the mayor said, actuarials, accountants, and lawyers. So it does take some time to dig through all this.
So I think what you're hearing from all of us is we're extremely concerned about it, and we want to work through it. Give us the ability and give staff the ability to get that information. So, the engineer who's here, who's been working 20 years, that their plan is sound.
So what we are saying.
Hey, the second thing I want to. Oh, I'm sorry, Madeline.
Sorry, Mayor. You can go ahead. I said, what we are saying in the meantime, business is as usual. Right now? Because are we saying what the pension board voted unanimously to bring to the council, which is business as usual right now? That's what we're saying, right?
Adam?
Well, Ms. Gales Harris, that item was removed from the agenda, so we're not voting on that. This is the separate issue of the individuals who are trying to decide whether to sign their pension application.
Right.
Yes. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, Madeline, did you understand that the item that's on the agenda, that it got pulled off the agenda, which is the thing that was kind of the business as usual deal that the pension committee voted on? Did you
Right.
hear it?
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure
Okay.
I understood it right. Thank you.
The last thing, I just want to bring up one other piece of other business. I think I sent an email to y'all on maybe it was last Friday night, maybe. We had a really good meeting Friday, and I was pleased, and Chief Fawkes, I think, met again yesterday with Rutherford County EMS as well as emergency management. They're finalizing the interlocal agreement, and Dr. Galloway, after meeting with Dr. Galloway, he's putting some really good protocols in place for there to be collaborative sharing. So anyway, Craig and I talked about this, and I don't as a sign of good faith, and we have had issues before, but I told y'all this in the email that to publicly go on to say, I don't think we have to have a formal motion, but that, the RFP process can stop. And I don't think there's any reason for us to have another task force meeting or to pay, John Rogers to come sit at a task force meeting when the professionals are finalizing the interlocal agreement. That'll go to Craig and to the attorneys to look at, and once that's looked at, that'll go to the city council, and then it also have to go to the county commission to vote on. But everything that I've heard and I've talked, I think we're well on our way. And Director Hudgens had just asked that we affirm to say that we're good with going that process, because they really want to start trying to get some people hired. And one of the things that we did talk about is, I think they have 11 to 13 people that they're short, and us trying to bridge that gap. And Chief Fawkes agreed to that, where, our Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue first responders can also work for Rutherford County if they choose. So anyway, it's all good. I want to make sure that that's headed in the right direction.
It's awesome. Thanks.
All right. Seeing no other business, we'll stand adjourned.